The vulture mark still smoldered on the wagon when Evelyn Hart found her family. 3 years later, she stood in Silver Ridge's dusty saloon, polishing the same glass for the 100th time, when a dangerous man walked through her doors. Jonas Kane carried death in his holsters and storms in his eyes. The Black Raven gang thought they'd broken her. They were wrong. Tonight, vengeance would ride again. If you're watching from your own troubled town, stay with me. This tale of justice cuts deep. The afternoon sun bore down mercilessly on Silver Ridge, a town that seemed to exist purely out of stubbornness rather than any good reason. Dust devils danced between the weathered buildings, and the single main street stretched like a scar through the desert landscape. At the far end stood the Broken Wheel Saloon, its painted sign creaking in the wind, the letters faded but still readable to those who cared to look. Inside, Evelyn Hart moved with practiced efficiency behind the bar, her movements automatic after 3 years of the same routine. Pour, serve, collect coins, wipe the bar, repeat. The glass in her hand had been polished to a shine 5 times over, but her mind wasn't on the task. It never was anymore. Her thoughts lived in the past, trapped in a night of fire and screams that no amount of whiskey could wash away. "Another round, Evie," called out Tom Brennan from his corner table, his voice already thick with drink, though the sun hadn't even begun its descent. She didn't correct him on the name. Nobody called her Evelyn anymore except in her dreams, where her mother's voice still echoed clear as church bells. She grabbed the bottle of rotgut whiskey and made her way to his table, stepping around a passed-out miner whose name she'd never bothered to learn. "Maybe you should slow down, Tom," she said quietly, though she poured anyway. Her voice carried that particular flatness that came from saying things you didn't believe to people who wouldn't listen. "Maybe you should mind your own business," Tom shot back, but there was no real heat in it. Everyone in Silver Ridge carried their own ghosts, and Tom's were particularly thirsty. The saloon doors swung open with enough force to make everyone look up. Even the piano player, old Samuel, stopped his endless rendition of "O Susanna" mid-note. The man who entered moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence held on a very short leash. He was tall, lean in the way of men who lived hard and traveled light, with dust-covered leather chaps and a long duster coat that had seen better decades. 2 Colt 45s rode low on his hips, tied down gunfighter style, and his hat cast shadows across features that looked carved from granite, but it was his eyes that made Evelyn's breath catch. Storm gray and constantly moving, cataloging every exit, every potential threat, every shadow that might hide danger. She'd seen eyes like that before, on men who'd crossed lines they couldn't come back from, men who'd made killing into an art form because it was that or be killed. The stranger walked to the bar with measured steps, his spurs singing a metallic melody against the floorboards. The other patrons quickly found reasons to look elsewhere, at their drinks, their cards, anywhere but at the newcomer who radiated danger like heat from a forge. "Whiskey," he said, his voice carrying the roughness of trail dust and little use. "The good stuff, if you have it." Evelyn studied him for a moment before reaching under the bar for the bottle she kept hidden, real Kentucky bourbon, that cost more than most folks in Silver Ridge saw in a month. She poured a measure into a clean glass and slid it across the bar. "Passing through?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Men like this didn't settle anywhere. "Maybe." He knocked back the whiskey in one smooth motion, then set the glass down gently. "Maybe not. Depends on what I find." "Nothing to find in Silver Ridge except dust and disappointment," she said, refilling his glass. "And ghosts, if you believe in such things." A smile played at the corner of his mouth, though it never reached those watchful eyes. "I believe in ghosts, miss. Question is whether they believe in me." Before Evelyn could respond, the doors burst open again. This time it was Sheriff Masters, his badge catching the light as he hurried in, face flushed and breathing hard. Bill Masters was pushing 60, with more gray in his mustache than black, but he'd kept Silver Ridge as peaceful as a town could be in these parts. The look on his face now, though, Evelyn had seen it only once before, 3 years ago. "We got trouble," Masters announced to the room, though his eyes fixed on the stranger at the bar. "Big trouble. The Hartley family, out at Sweetwater Ranch." He paused, swallowing hard. "They're dead. All of them. Even the children." The saloon erupted in shocked murmurs and curses. Tom Brennan dropped his glass, sending whiskey spreading across the table. Samuel's hands trembled on the piano keys, producing a discordant note that hung in the air like a scream. But Evelyn went very still. Her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the bar, she forced out the words. How? Masters removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning hair. Same as before. The whole place burned. Family shot first so they couldn't run. And he hesitated, then continued. They left their mark. Burned it right into the side of the wagon. The vulture, Evelyn whispered, though everyone heard it in the sudden silence. The Black Raven gang, Masters confirmed grimly. They're back. The stranger at the bar straightened slightly, his interest clearly piqued. Black Raven gang. Masters looked at him suspiciously. You know of them, stranger. Jonas Kane, the man supplied, touching the brim of his hat slightly. And yes, Sheriff, I know of them. Been tracking them for the better part of 6 months. They killed a judge's family down in Tucson. Man hired me to bring him their heads. Bounty hunter, Tom Brennan spat from his corner, making it sound like a curse. Kane didn't even glance his way. Among other things. Question is, Sheriff, do you want them stopped or do you want to keep burying families? Masters bristled. Of course I want them stopped. But this is a matter for the law. The law? Evelyn's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Where was the law 3 years ago when they burned my family's farm? When they shot my father in front of my mother, made her watch before... She cut herself off, jaw clenched tight. Every eye in the saloon turned to her. Most folks knew Evelyn had lost family to outlaws, but she'd never spoken of it, never given details. The pain in her voice was raw, fresh as if it had happened yesterday instead of 3 years past. Kane studied her with those storm-gray eyes. You're Evelyn Hart, the Willow Creek Massacre. She flinched at the name the newspapers had given it. Just Evie now. Evelyn Hart died that night along with everyone else. No, Kane said quietly. She didn't. She's standing right here, serving whiskey to ghosts and waiting. Question is, waiting for what? That's enough, Masters intervened, but Kane held up a hand. Sheriff, how many men you got? 2? 3? The Black Ravens ride with at least a dozen, maybe more. They're organized, ruthless, and smart. You go after them with a regular posse, you'll just add to the body count. So what do you propose? Masters asked, though he didn't look happy about it. I hunt them. It's what I do. But I could use someone who knows the land, knows where they might hole up. His eyes never left Evelyn. Someone with skin in the game. Absolutely not, Masters said firmly. I won't have vigilante justice in my town. Your town. Evelyn's voice cut through his protest like a blade. Your town is dying, Bill. Has been for years. The mines are playing out. The railroad passed us by, and now the Black Ravens are back to pick the bones. You want to know what I've been waiting for? This, exactly this. She untied her apron and threw it on the bar. I know every canyon, every water hole, every hidden trail for 50 miles in any direction. My daddy taught me to track before I could properly walk, and to shoot before I could read. You want the Black Ravens, Mr. Kane? Then you've got yourself a guide. Evie, no, Samuel spoke up from the piano. This ain't the way. Then what is? She rounded on him, eyes blazing. Waiting for them to kill another family? Another child? They took everything from me, Samuel. Everything. And now they're back, doing it again. If Bill won't stop them, and God seems content to let them ride, then maybe it's time for something else. Kane finished his whiskey and set the glass down. You got a gun? My daddy's Winchester. Been cleaning it every week for 3 years. And can you use it? Put 3 shots through a playing card at 50 yards last Sunday, out behind the church where I thought no one was watching. A ghost of a smile crossed Kane's face. Father Miguel mentioned something about that when I watered my horse earlier. Said you had uncommon focus for target practice after service. Masters tried one more time. This is a mistake. Both of you. The Black Ravens. They don't just kill. They make examples. What they did to the Hartley family was exactly what they did to mine, Evelyn finished. I know what they're capable of, Bill. I live with it every single day. Every night when I close my eyes, I see it. Smell the smoke, hear the screams. She paused, steadying herself. But I'm done being scared. Done hiding behind this bar, pretending that serving drinks to broken men is any kind of life. When do we leave, Shay? She asked Kane. First light, he replied. Need supplies, ammunition, and you'll need proper riding clothes. That dress won't do for what's coming. I've got my brother's clothes. Kept them, though God knows why. Her voice caught slightly. They should fit well enough. Tom Brennan struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. This is madness. You're going to get yourself killed, girl. Maybe, Evelyn acknowledged, but at least I'll die trying to do something. What are you doing, Tom, except dying by degrees in that corner? The drunk man flinched and sank back into his chair. Kane stood, placing coins on the bar for his drinks. Sheriff, I respect the law. Had a badge myself once, before the war. But sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes you need something meaner, something willing to go into the dark places where decent folk won't tread. That's what I am. That's what she's choosing to become. You can help us, or you can stay out of our way, but we're going after them either way. Masters looked between them, his face showing the weight of his years and responsibilities. I can't officially sanction this. You understand that? I do, Kane nodded. But, Masters continued heavily, I can tell you that old Sam Hartley mentioned seeing riders near Devil's Canyon last week. Said they had a camp up in the rocks, though he didn't get close enough to confirm. Might be nothing. Might be something. Devil's Canyon, Evelyn breathed. That's where they were before. Where they staged from when they hit my family. There's water there, good sight lines, and a box canyon in the back that's perfect for keeping horses. Then that's where we start, Kane said. He turned to Evelyn. You sure about this? Once we ride out together, there's no going back. The woman you were, the life you had here, it all ends. It ended 3 years ago, she said firmly. I just haven't admitted it until now. Kane nodded slowly. Fair enough. First light, then. Meet me at the livery stable. Bring your rifle, extra ammunition if you have it, and food for 3 days. We travel light and fast. He turned to leave, then paused at the doors. One more thing, Miss Hart. This isn't about justice. Justice is what courts and judges deal in. This is about something older, something darker. This is about vengeance. You need to be clear on that before we ride. I've been clear on that for 3 years, Mr. Kane, she replied steadily. The only question was whether I'd get the chance. He touched his hat brim again and walked out into the dying light of day, leaving the saloon in stunned silence. Evelyn looked around at the faces she'd served for 3 years, miners, drunks, drifters, all of them wounded in their own ways, all of them hiding from something. She'd thought she was different, stronger somehow, for continuing to function, for getting up each day and going through the motions. But Kane was right. She'd been waiting, and now the wait was over. Samuel, she called to the piano player. Play something. Anything but Oh, Susanna. The old man's fingers found the keys, and a melancholy tune filled the air. Lorena, a song of love and loss from the war. Evelyn walked to the window and looked out at the street, where Kane was leading his horse toward the livery. A dust devil swirled between them, carrying the debris of Silver Ridge's slow decay. Behind her, she heard Masters talking quietly to some of the men, probably organizing his own posse despite what he'd said. He was a good man, would do things by the book as much as he could. But Evelyn knew, with a certainty that sat cold in her stomach, that the book wouldn't be enough. Not for the Black Ravens, not for the men who'd taught her what real darkness looked like. She went upstairs to the small room she rented above the saloon, each step feeling like a goodbye. The room wasn't much, a bed, a washstand, a trunk of clothes, and there, in the corner, wrapped in oilcloth, her father's Winchester. She unwrapped it slowly, running her hands along the smooth wood stock, the cold metal barrel. Her father had taught her to shoot with this very rifle, out on the prairie where the world seemed to go on forever. Always aim true, Evie, he'd said. A gun's just a tool, but in the right hands, it can be the difference between living and dying. Respect it, but don't fear it. She'd respected it for 3 years. Now it was time to use it. From the trunk, she pulled out her brother's clothes, Sturdy pants, a work shirt, a leather vest that had seen better days. Tommy had been 17 when he died, trying to protect their mother. He'd managed to shoot one of the raiders before they cut him down. Evelyn had hidden in the root cellar, following her father's last desperate command, listening to everything, seeing nothing until the smoke drove her out. She dressed slowly, each piece of clothing feeling like armor, like she was putting on someone else's skin. When she looked in the cracked mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman looking back had harder eyes, a firmer set to her jaw. This wasn't Evie the saloon girl. This was someone else. Someone her family's killers had created that night 3 years ago. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." It was Sheriff Masters, looking every one of his 60 years. "Evie, I need to talk to you. If you're here to try and stop me, I'm not." He sat heavily on the single chair in the room. "I'm here to tell you something I should have told you 3 years ago. About the Black Ravens? About why I couldn't catch them." Evelyn felt her blood chill. "What do you mean?" "They've got protection. Someone high up, someone with money and influence. Every time we got close, word would somehow get to them. Every posse would find empty camps, cold fires. I've had my suspicions, but no proof." "Who?" The word came out sharp as a blade. "I don't know for certain. But there's been talk about the railroad company buying up land cheap from families who've been burned out, scared off. The Hartley place sits right on the proposed new line route. As did my family's farm," Evelyn said slowly, pieces clicking together in her mind. "As did yours," Masters confirmed. "I'm telling you this because if you and Kane start poking around, you might stir up more than just the gang. You might find yourself going up against people with a lot more power than some outlaws." "Let them come," Evelyn said flatly. "All of them." Masters stood, shaking his head. "You sound just like your father. He was a stubborn man, too, right up until the end. He was a good man." "Yes, he was. And look where it got him." Masters paused at the door. "Kane's dangerous, Evie. Maybe as dangerous as the men you're hunting. Don't trust him too far." "I don't trust anyone anymore, Bill. Haven't for 3 years." After he left, Evelyn finished her preparations. She loaded the Winchester, filled a belt with cartridges, packed what little food she had into a saddlebag. Then she sat on the bed and waited for dawn, her rifle across her lap, listening to the sounds of the saloon below, the clink of glasses, the murmur of voices, Samuel's piano, the sounds of a life she was leaving behind. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. It sounded like lamentation, like the earth itself mourning what was to come. Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat and remembered her mother's laugh, her father's strong hands, Tommy's terrible jokes. She remembered until the memories turned to ash and smoke, until all that was left was the fire. When the first pale light of dawn crept through her window, she was ready. She stood, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and walked out of the room without looking back. The saloon was empty except for Tom Brennan, passed out in his corner. She left a bottle of the good whiskey by his hand, a farewell gift to the ghost he'd become. Outside, the morning was cold, the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. Kane was already at the livery, checking his horse's hooves, his movements efficient and practiced. He looked up as she approached, taking in her appearance with those storm-gray eyes. "You look different," he observed. "I am different," she replied, tying her saddlebags to the horse Masters had left for her, a sturdy mare named Duchess, who'd carried many a posse rider. "That's good. Different might keep you alive." They mounted up as the sun broke the horizon, casting long shadows across Silver Ridge. A few early risers watched from doorways and windows. Word had spread, as word always did in small towns. Some nodded approval, others shook their heads at the folly of it all. Father Miguel stood outside his small church, his weathered face grave. He raised his hand in blessing as they passed, and Evelyn thought she saw his lips moving in prayer. She wondered if prayers could reach into the darkness they were riding toward, or if some places were beyond even God's light. As they reached the edge of town, Kane pulled up his horse. "Last chance to turn back." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "There's no turning back." Not anymore. They rode out into the desert. two figures against the vast expanse of sand and stone, chasing ghosts and vengeance under the rising sun. Behind them, Silver Ridge grew smaller, until it was just a smudge on the horizon, then nothing at all. The hunt had begun. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of ochre and rust painted with sage and scattered rocks. Kane set a steady pace, not pushing the horses but not dawdling either. He rode with an economy of movement that spoke of countless miles in the saddle, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "Tell me about that night," he said after they'd been riding for an hour. "All of it." Evelyn's hands tightened on the reins. "Why?" "Because details matter. The way they operated, how many there were, how they moved, it all tells me something about how to find them." So she told him, her voice steady despite the pain of the memory. She told him about the riders appearing at dusk, about her father trying to negotiate, offering them food and water, about how they'd laughed and shot him anyway, about Tommy rushing out with the old shotgun, managing to wound one before they cut him down, about her mother's screams cut short, about the fire that followed consuming everything while she cowered in the root cellar, pressing her hands over her ears but unable to block out the sounds. "How many?" Kane asked when she finished. 7, maybe 8. It was hard to tell in the smoke and chaos. "The one your brother shot, did he die?" "I don't know. They carried him off, but there was a lot of blood." Kane nodded thoughtfully. "They take care of their own." "That's useful to know. What about their leader?" "A big man with a scar across his jaw, black beard, dead eyes. The others called him Morrison." "Caleb Morrison," Kane supplied. "He's the gang's second in command." "The leader is a man named Luther Crow." "Did you see him?" "No, just Morrison and the others. Crow probably stayed back. He usually does for the smaller raids, lets Morrison handle the dirty work." Kane pulled out a canteen, took a swig, and offered it to her. "You did right hiding. Nothing you could have done would have changed the outcome, except to add your body to the count." "Sometimes I wish it had," Evelyn admitted quietly. "No," Kane said sharply. "Death is easy. It's the living that takes courage, and the hunting, that takes something else entirely." They rode in silence for a while, the sun climbing higher, the heat beginning to build. Evelyn found herself studying Kane, trying to understand what kind of man chose this life. His face was weathered but not old, maybe 35, 40 at most. His hands were steady, calloused in the way of men who worked with guns and ropes. But there was something in his bearing, a weight he carried that had nothing to do with the weapons on his hips. "You said you had a badge once," she ventured, "before the war." "Town marshal in Kansas, little place called Cedar Falls." His voice was neutral, giving away nothing. "What happened?" "The war happened. Then the war ended, and I came back to find Cedar Falls burned to the ground. Quantrill's raiders, they said, though by then it didn't much matter who'd done it. Everyone was dead." "Everyone?" "My wife, my son. He would have been 12 this year." The words hung between them, heavy as stones. Evelyn understood now, the weight he carried, the storm in his eyes. He was hunting his own ghosts, just wearing different faces. The sun had climbed to its zenith when they reached the first marker Kane had been looking for, a distinctive rock formation that looked like a church steeple rising from the desert floor. He dismounted and studied the ground carefully, running his fingers through the sand, examining broken twigs on a nearby mesquite bush. 3 riders passed through here maybe 2 days ago," he said, pointing to barely visible tracks, "heading northeast toward Devil's Canyon, just like the sheriff suggested." Evelyn dismounted as well, her legs stiff from hours in the saddle. She hadn't ridden this long in years, not since before that night. "How can you tell it was 3? "Different horseshoe patterns. See here?" He pointed to marks in the dust she would have missed entirely. "This one's got a chip in the left front shoe. This one's riding a smaller horse, probably a mare. And this third set is deeper, either a bigger rider or loaded saddlebags." "Or both," Evelyn said, thinking of the gold and valuables the gang would have taken from the Hartley ranch. Kane stood, dusting off his hands. "You learn fast." "That's good. Out here, the slow learners don't last long." They watered the horses from Kane's reserve. He carried more water than seemed necessary, but Evelyn was beginning to understand that everything about Jonas Kane was calculated for survival. As Duchess drank, Evelyn found herself watching the horizon, half expecting to see riders appear like they had that night 3 years ago. "They won't come at us in daylight," Kane said, reading her thoughts. "Not their style. The Black Ravens prefer darkness, surprise. They're cowards at heart, only brave when they have numbers and the advantage." "Then why are we traveling in daylight?" "Because I want them to know we're coming." At her surprised look, he elaborated. "Fear works both ways, Miss Hart. Right now they think they own this desert, that they can strike wherever they please. But when they learn someone's hunting them, really hunting them, not just another bumbling posse they can easily evade, that changes things. Scared men make mistakes." "And if they decide to hunt us instead?" Kane's smile was cold as winter iron. "Then they'll learn why I've survived this long doing what I do." They mounted up again and continued northeast, the landscape gradually changing from open desert to broken country. Ravines, boulder fields, stands of cottonwoods marking hidden springs. This was ambush country, and Evelyn found her hand drifting to her rifle more and more often. It was late afternoon when they found the body. The buzzards led them to it, circling lazily in the thermals above a cluster of rocks. Kane approached carefully, gun drawn, while Evelyn covered him with her rifle. But there was no ambush, just a dead man sprawled in the sand, his clothes torn and bloody. "One of them?" Evelyn asked, though she could see he wasn't dressed like a rancher or townsman. Kane knelt beside the body, examining it with clinical detachment. "Jake Fowler, rode with the gang for years, 2 bullets in the back, close range." He rolled the body slightly. "And he's been stripped of weapons and valuables. Even his boots are gone." "They killed their own?" "Looks like it. Question is why." Kane stood, scanning the area. "There, blood trail leading that way. He was shot somewhere else, managed to make it this far before collapsing." They followed the trail to a small campsite hidden among the rocks. The ashes of a fire were still warm, and the ground showed signs of multiple horses and men. "They were here this morning," Kane said, reading the signs. "Had an argument by the look of it. See the scuff marks? The overturned coffee pot?" Fowler lost the argument. "What would they argue about?" "Could be anything. Division of loot, leadership challenges, or maybe Fowler wanted out. Once you're in a gang like the Black Ravens, leaving isn't usually an option that ends well." Evelyn studied the scene, trying to see what Kane saw. "There's something else. Look at the tracks leading away. They split up." Kane's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very good. Yes, looks like the gang divided. Main group headed deeper toward Devil's Canyon, but 3 or 4 riders went south. Why would they do that? Discord in the ranks, maybe. Or they're planning something that requires splitting their forces." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "We need to make a choice. Follow the main group to their hideout, or track the splinter group." "The splinter group might be easier to take," Evelyn said, thinking tactically. "Fewer numbers." "True. But the main group has Morrison, probably Crow too. They're the real targets." Evelyn thought about it, then said, "My father used to hunt wolves that were taking our livestock. He said the trick wasn't to go after the whole pack at once. You pick off the strays, the scouts, make the pack nervous, then when you finally go for the leaders, they're already rattled." Kane looked at her with something that might have been approval. "Your father was a smart man. South it is, then." They turned their horses and began following the smaller set of tracks. The trail led them through a maze of arroyos and dry washes, perfect terrain for losing pursuers or setting ambushes. Kane moved carefully, often dismounting to scout ahead on foot, while Evelyn held the horses. As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson, they heard voices ahead. Kane immediately gestured for silence, and they tied the horses to a scrub oak before creeping forward on foot. In a hollow below them, 4 men sat around a small fire. Evelyn recognized the type immediately. Hard cases, killers, the kind of men who'd sell their own mothers for drinking money. They were passing a bottle around, their voices carrying clearly in the still evening air. "I still say we should have stuck with Morrison," one was saying, a thin man with a pockmarked face. "This splitting up feels wrong." "Morrison's lost his nerve," another replied. "This one bigger, with a belly that hung over his gun belt. Ever since that Hart girl survived the Willow Creek job, he's been jumpy. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. They were talking about her, about that night. That wasn't supposed to happen, a third man said. We was told the whole family would be there. Someone gave us bad information. Or someone warned her, the fat one suggested. Maybe she knew we were coming. Don't be stupid, Bart, the thin man said. If she'd known, they'd have been ready for us. No, she just got lucky, being in town that day. Evelyn's mind raced. She hadn't been in town that day. She'd been right there, hidden in the root cellar. But they thought she'd been gone, that she'd missed the attack by chance. Someone had given them information about her family, but that information had been wrong. Kane touched her arm, bringing her back to the present. He held up 4 fingers, then pointed to various positions around the camp. He was planning the attack, showing her where each man was, where the dangers lay. Then he pointed to her, to a position on the left that would give her a clear shot at 2 of them, while he gestured that he'd take the right. She nodded, understanding. This was it, her first real fight, not just target practice behind the church. These men had been there that night. They'd helped murder her family. Her hands were steady as she moved into position, her father's rifle familiar and comforting in her grip. Kane gave her a moment to get ready, then stepped out from cover, his guns already drawn. Evening, gentlemen. The 4 men scrambled for their weapons, but Kane was already firing. His first shot took the thin man in the chest, spinning him into the fire. His second caught another man in the shoulder, dropping him. Evelyn squeezed her trigger, the rifle bucking against her shoulder. The fat man, Bart, jerked and fell. She worked the lever, aimed, fired again. The 4th man was trying to run, but her shot caught him in the leg, sending him sprawling. In seconds, it was over. 2 dead, 2 wounded, and groaning. Kane walked into the camp, keeping his guns trained on the survivors. Well, he said conversationally, looks like we need to have a talk. The man Evelyn had shot in the leg was trying to crawl away. She stepped on his wounded leg, making him scream. You were there, she said, her voice cold as winter wind. At Willow Creek. You were there when my family died. The man's eyes widened in terror as he looked up at her. You're the Hart girl, but you weren't. You thought wrong. She pressed harder, and he screamed again. Tell me about Morrison. Tell me about who gave you the information about my family. I don't know, he gasped. Morrison handled all that. We just did what we were told. Kane had tied up the other wounded man and now stood beside her. He's probably telling the truth. Foot soldiers rarely know the whole picture, but he knows where Morrison is, don't you, friend? The wounded man nodded frantically. Devil's Canyon, the old Apache ruins. There's a hideout there, been using it for years. Morrison's there with Crow and maybe 8 others. And the people paying you? Evelyn demanded. The ones who wanted our land. The man's face went even paler. I don't know nothing about that, I swear. Morrison and Crow handle the money side. We just do the killing. Just the killing, Evelyn repeated flatly. She looked at Kane. What do we do with them? Kane's expression was unreadable. That's your choice. They're wounded, can't hurt anyone now. We could tie them up, leave them for the sheriff to find. Or ... He let the alternative hang unspoken. Evelyn looked down at the man who'd helped destroy her life, who'd participated in the murder of her family and the Hartleys and God knew how many others. The rifle in her hand seemed to grow heavier. Please, the man whimpered. I got family too, kids. So did the people you killed, she said quietly. She thought of Tommy trying to protect their mother, of her father attempting to negotiate with monsters, of all the families torn apart by these men's greed and violence. She raised the rifle. Evelyn, Kane said quietly, once you cross this line, there's no going back. Killing in a fight is one thing. This is something else. She met his storm gray eyes. You said this was about vengeance, not justice. I did. But you need to be sure. The weight of it, it changes you. Evelyn thought about the 3 years she'd spent serving whiskey to broken men, polishing glasses while her soul withered inside her. She thought about the nightmares that never stopped, the smell of smoke that haunted her even on clear days. She was already changed, already broken. The only question was whether she'd die that way or become something else. She lowered the rifle. Tie them up, but tight. I want them to suffer while they wait. She looked at the wounded men with cold eyes. And if you somehow get free, know that I'll be coming back for you. All of you. Kane nodded and set about securing the prisoners with rope from their own horses. While he worked, Evelyn searched the camp. She found saddlebags stuffed with money and jewelry, loot from the Hartley Ranch and others. There were also papers, including what looked like a map with several ranches marked. Kane, look at this. He studied the map, his expression darkening. They're marking targets. Look, the Hartley place, your family's farm, and 3 others all along the proposed railroad route. So it's true. Someone's using them to clear the land. More than that. Look at this notation. Payment on completion, usual drop. They're getting paid for each family they drive off or kill. Evelyn felt sick. Her family hadn't just been random victims. They'd been obstacles to be removed, their lives valued in dollars and cents by someone who'd never even met them. The usual drop, Kane mused. That means a regular location for payment. If we could find that... We could find who's behind this, Evelyn finished. But first, Morrison and Crow. Agreed. But now they'll know we're coming. These 4 were supposed to rejoin the main group. When they don't show up, Morrison will get suspicious. Good, Evelyn said flatly. Let him be scared for once. They made camp a safe distance from the prisoners, who they'd left tied to a dead tree where they'd be visible to anyone following the trail. Kane built a small, smokeless fire while Evelyn tended the horses. As darkness fell, the desert came alive with different sounds, coyotes, owls, the rustle of small creatures in the brush. You did well today, Kane said, handing her a cup of coffee. Most people freeze in their first real fight. I've been frozen for 3 years, she replied. Today I finally thawed out. They ate in companionable silence, hardtack and dried beef, basic trail food. The stars emerged one by one until the sky was a blanket of lights. Out here, away from even the meager lights of Silver Ridge, the Milky Way was visible in all its glory. Tell me about your son, Evelyn said suddenly, surprising herself with the question. Kane was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his name was Marcus. Loved horses, could ride before he could properly walk. His mother used to say he was born for the saddle. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He wanted to be a lawman like his old man. Used to practice his quick draw with a wooden gun I carved for him. What was she like? Your wife? Sarah. Strongest woman I ever knew. Came west from Boston, of all places. Her family disowned her for marrying a frontier lawman, but she didn't care. Said she'd rather have one day of real life than a lifetime of Boston society. She sounds remarkable. She was. Kane's voice hardened. They burned her alive in our house. Marcus, too. I found their bodies still holding each other. The words hung in the darkness between them, terrible in their simplicity. Is that why you hunt? For vengeance? At first, yes. I hunted Quantrill's men for 2 years, killed 7 of them before I realized the truth. It didn't bring Sarah and Marcus back. Didn't even make the pain less. If anything, it made it worse because each kill reminded me why I was killing. Then why continue? Kane poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night. Because I'm good at it. And because men like Morrison and Crow need to be stopped. If not by me, then who? The law can't reach them. Good people won't dirty their hands with what needs doing. That leaves people like us, the damaged ones, the ones with nothing left to lose. Is that what we are? Damaged? Look at us, Miss Hart. We're hunting human beings across a desert, planning to kill them all. What would you call it? Evelyn considered this. Necessary. Kane laughed. A short, bitter sound. Maybe so. Doesn't make it any less damaging to the soul, though. My soul died 3 years ago, Evelyn said quietly. Now I'm just settling accounts. No, Kane said, looking at her across the fire. If your soul was dead, you'd have killed those wounded men without hesitation. The fact that you didn't, that you struggled with it, that means there's still something in you worth saving. And you? Is there anything left worth saving in you? Kane was quiet for a moment. I used to think not. But lately, he trailed off, then shook his head. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we hit the main camp. Evelyn rolled up in her blanket, using her saddle as a pillow. But sleep eluded her. She kept thinking about what the outlaws had said, that someone had given them information about her family, that she was supposed to have been there. Who could have known their routines well enough to provide such information? Who had that much to gain? As she finally drifted off, she found herself dreaming not of fire and death, but of a small boy with a wooden gun, practicing his quick draw while his mother laughed. She woke with tears on her cheeks, uncertain whether they were for Marcus and Sarah Kane, or for the girl she'd been before the world taught her about real darkness. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the promise of violence. They broke camp quickly, efficiently, like people who'd been doing this all their lives instead of just 2 days. The wounded outlaws were still tied to their tree, suffering but alive. Kane left them water, just enough to keep them going until someone found them. That's more mercy than they showed my family, Evelyn observed. It's not mercy, Kane replied. It's practicality. Dead men tell no tales. These two will sing like birds when the sheriff finds them, and word will spread. The Black Ravens will know we left them alive when we could have killed them. It'll confuse them, make them wonder what we're planning. They rode hard toward Devil's Canyon, following trails that grew increasingly difficult. The landscape here was brutal. Towering red rock walls, narrow passages that could hide a dozen ambushes, scattered bones of animals that hadn't been strong enough or lucky enough to survive. It was noon when they reached the mouth of the canyon. Kane stopped, studying the entrance with the intensity of a man reading scripture. They'll have sentries, he said. Probably here and here. He pointed to 2 elevated positions. We go in there blind. We're dead. So what do? We wait for dark, then we do what they do. Use the night. He led them to a concealed position where they could watch the canyon entrance without being seen. In the meantime, we watch, learn their patterns. They spent the afternoon observing. Twice, riders emerged from the canyon, heading out on what looked like scouting missions. Kane memorized their faces, their horses, their weapons. Evelyn found herself doing the same, her father's training coming back. Always know your enemy better than they know themselves. As the sun began its descent, Kane outlined his plan. We go in on foot, leave the horses here. Take out the sentries silently, then work our way to the main camp. In the dark, confusion will be our friend. They won't know how many we are, where we're coming from. And Morrison? He's mine, Kane said flatly. But Crow, that one's your choice. Evelyn checked her rifle, her pistol, a Colt .38 Kane had given her from the outlaws' weapons. I want them both, but I'll settle for whoever I can get. As darkness fell, they prepared. Kane produced items from his saddlebags that Evelyn hadn't known he carried. A short, wicked knife, dark cloth to wrap around their faces, even bootblack to darken their skin. Night fighting is different, he explained as he helped her prepare. It's about becoming shadow, about making the darkness your ally. When full dark arrived, they moved. Kane went first, moving with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. Evelyn followed, trying to match his stealth. They reached the first sentry position, a man sitting on a rock, rifle across his knees, fighting sleep. Kane gestured for her to stay put, then disappeared into the darkness. She heard nothing, saw only a brief movement, and then Kane was back, wiping his knife clean. The sentry was slumped over, looking like he'd dozed off. The second sentry was more alert, pacing back and forth on a ledge. This one would be harder. Kane studied the situation, then picked up a small stone. He threw it off to the side, making it clatter in the darkness. The sentry turned toward the sound, raising his rifle. Evelyn understood. As the sentry focused on the noise, she moved along the base of the ledge, finding handholds in the rock. She climbed silently, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he'd hear it, but he was still looking in the direction of Kane's thrown stone. She reached the ledge behind him. The knife Kane had given her was heavy in her hand. For a moment, she hesitated. This was different from shooting, more personal. Then she remembered her mother's screams, and the knife found its mark. The sentry dropped with barely a sound. Kane appeared beside her, nodding approval. Quick and clean. You're a natural. I don't want to be a natural at this, she whispered back. Nobody does. But better to be good at it than dead. They moved deeper into the canyon, following the smell of smoke and the sound of voices. The Apache ruins Kane had mentioned became visible, ancient stone structures built into the canyon walls, providing perfect defensive positions. The Black Ravens had made it their fortress. The main camp was in a natural amphitheater, with fires burning and men moving about. Evelyn counted 10, maybe 12. Morrison was there, his scarred jaw visible in the firelight as he talked to another man, Luther Crow, she assumed, based on the deference the other showed him. Too many for a direct assault, Kane whispered. We need to even the odds. He pointed to the horse corral on one side of the camp. We scatter their mounts first, create chaos. Then we hit them from two sides in the confusion. They crept toward the corral. The horses sensed them, stirring nervously, but Kane had a way with animals. He moved among them calmly, cutting the rope that held the makeshift gate closed. Then he pulled out a small bottle from his pocket, poured its contents on a cloth, and waved it near the horses. The effect was immediate. The horses went wild, charging out of the corral and through the camp. Men shouted, diving out of the way. In the chaos, Kane opened fire from one position while Evelyn shot from another. Her first shot took a man reaching for his rifle. Her second caught another trying to organize resistance. The camp became a maelstrom of gunfire, shouting, and running horses. Through the smoke and confusion, she saw Morrison diving behind a wagon, returning fire. Kane was moving, shooting, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. But there were still too many outlaws, and they were starting to organize. That's when things went wrong. A shot from above. They'd missed a sentry in the ruins. The bullet caught Kane in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, his guns flying from his hands. Morrison saw the opportunity and emerged from cover, advancing on Kane's position. Well, well, he called out. Jonas Kane, I heard you were coming for us. Guess your reputation was bigger than your skill. Evelyn had a clear shot at Morrison's back. She aimed, but before she could fire, someone grabbed her from behind. Luther Crow, moving quieter than a man his size should be able to. He knocked the rifle from her hands, his arm around her throat. Got us a wildcat here, Morrison, Crow called out. Pretty little thing, too. Morrison turned and his eyes widened in recognition. The Heart Girl. You're supposed to be dead. A lot of people supposed to be dead who aren't, Evelyn gasped against Crow's chokehold. Morrison laughed. True enough, but we can fix that tonight. Should have done it 3 years ago, but the boss said you weren't supposed to be there. Guess he was wrong about that. Who? Evelyn struggled against Crow's grip. Who's paying you? Like you'll live long enough for it to matter. Morrison raised his gun toward Kane, who was trying to crawl to his weapons despite his wounded shoulder. First him, then you, slowly. That's when Evelyn remembered the Colt 38 in her belt. Crow was focused on holding her still, not on her hands. She drew it, angled it back, and fired. The shot was awkward, but at this range it didn't matter. Crow screamed, releasing her as he clutched his side. Morrison spun toward her, but Kane had reached one of his guns. His shot caught Morrison in the chest, sending him staggering. Evelyn fired again, and Morrison fell, his scarred face registering surprise before going slack. The remaining outlaws, seeing both their leaders down, broke and ran. Some headed deeper into the ruins, others tried for the canyon entrance. Evelyn grabbed her rifle and picked off 2 more before they could escape. Kane, despite his wound, managed to drop another. In minutes, it was over. The camp was littered with bodies, the fire still burning as if nothing had happened. Crow was still alive, gasping on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Evelyn stood over him, rifle pointed at his head. The name. Who's paying you? Crow coughed, blood speckling his lips. You think you've won? You've got no idea how deep this goes. The name, she repeated, pressing the rifle barrel against his forehead. Blackwood, he gasped. Richard, Blackwood, Railroad, Company. The name meant nothing to her, but she filed it away. Why my family? Why specifically us? Crow laughed, a wet, choking sound. Your old man found something in the ground, something worth more than land. His eyes were starting to glaze. Blackwood wanted it, quiet-like. No official claims. What did he find? But Crow was past answering, his breath rattling to a stop. She stood there for a moment, processing this new information. Her father had found something valuable on their land. Gold? Silver? Something worth killing for, worth hiring an entire gang to terrorize families off their property. Evelyn! Kane's voice was tight with pain. She rushed to him, examining his shoulder. The bullet had gone through, which was good, but he was losing blood. We need to get you help, she said, tearing strips from her shirt to bind the wound. Not yet, he said through gritted teeth. Search the camp. There might be more information, evidence. They spent an hour going through the outlaw's belongings while Evelyn kept pressure on Kane's wound. They found more maps, ledgers showing payments, and most importantly, a letter with Richard Blackwood's signature authorizing payment for land acquisition services. This is it, Evelyn breathed. This proves he hired them. Proves he paid them, Kane corrected. Good lawyer might argue he didn't know what they were doing with the money. But it's a start. As dawn broke over Devil's Canyon, they loaded what evidence they could onto two of the outlaws' horses that hadn't fled far. Kane could barely sit his saddle, but he refused to be tied on like baggage. We need to get you to a doctor, Evelyn insisted. Silver Ridge first, he said. Need to report to Masters. Make this official. Then, he paused, swaying slightly. Then we go after Blackwood. We? You're in no condition. I'll heal. And this isn't finished. Men like Blackwood don't give up easy. He'll send more killers or try to bury this legally. Either way, you'll need help. They rode slowly out of the canyon, past the bodies of the sentries, past the scattered remains of the Black Ravens gang. The sun painted the rocks red as blood, fitting for what had happened here. But as they crested a rise and saw Silver Ridge in the distance, Evelyn saw riders coming hard from the town. A lot of riders. She raised her rifle, thinking it might be more of Blackwood's men, but Kane put a hand on her arm. It's Masters, he said, his voice growing weaker. With a posse. The riders surrounded them, Sheriff Masters at the lead. His face was grim as he took in Kane's wound, the blood on Evelyn's clothes, the laden horses. We found the men you left tied up, Masters said. They sang quite a song. Is it done? Morrison and Crow are dead, Evelyn reported. Most of the gang, too. And we have evidence. Richard Blackwood, the railroad magnate, he's behind it all. Masters' expression darkened further. Blackwood's in town. Arrived this morning with a dozen hired guns and a judge from the territorial capital. Claims you two murdered legitimate railroad security officers. What? Evelyn's shock must have shown on her face. He's getting ahead of it, Kane said weakly. Trying to control the narrative. Smart. I've got to bring you in, Masters said apologetically. Both of you, but I promise you'll get a fair hearing. A hearing in front of Blackwood's judge. Evelyn's hand tightened on her rifle. That's not justice, that's a lynching with paperwork. Maybe, but if you run now, you become outlaws for real. Is that what you want? Evelyn looked at Kane, who was barely staying conscious. He needed help, and soon. She could run, but not with him in this condition. And without him. Fine, she said, but I keep my weapons. Masters looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded. Fair enough. You've earned that much. As they rode toward Silver Ridge, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they'd won the battle but were about to lose the war. Blackwood had money, influence, and now legal authority on his side. They had evidence, but would it be enough? Behind them, smoke was rising from Devil's Canyon where the outlaws' camp still burned. Ahead, Silver Ridge waited with its own kind of danger, the type that came dressed in suits and legal documents, but was no less deadly for its civilized appearance. The real fight, Evelyn realized, was just beginning. The ride into Silver Ridge felt like a funeral procession, with Kane slumped forward in his saddle and blood seeping through the makeshift bandages. Evelyn rode close beside him, ready to catch him if he fell, while Sheriff Masters and his posse formed a protective circle around them. The townspeople lined the street, some looking relieved, others suspicious, and a few openly hostile. Standing on the porch of the Imperial Hotel was a man who could only be Richard Blackwood. He was everything Evelyn had expected and more. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair, and an expensive suit that probably cost more than most folks in Silver Ridge saw in a year. His eyes were cold as winter steel when they fixed on her, though his expression remained pleasantly neutral. Beside him stood a thin man in judge's robes and the dozen hired guns Masters had mentioned, all wearing badges that looked suspiciously new. "Sheriff Masters," Blackwood called out in a voice that carried authority like a weapon. "I trust you've apprehended the murderers?" "I've brought in 2 people for questioning regarding the deaths at Devil's Canyon," Masters replied carefully. "One of them needs immediate medical attention." "A wounded killer is still a killer," the judge beside Blackwood said. His voice had the oily quality of a man well practiced in bending the law to suit whoever paid him best. "They should both be locked up immediately." "Judge Harrington, with respect, Jonas Kane needs a doctor, or he'll die," Masters said firmly. "Dead men can't stand trial." Evelyn noticed how Blackwood's eyes flickered at that, a quick calculation passing behind them. A dead Kane would simplify things for him, but might also make him look guilty if Kane died in custody. "Very well," Blackwood conceded with apparent magnanimity. "Let him see the doctor, but under guard. The woman goes to jail immediately." "Like hell," Evelyn said, her hand moving to her rifle. The hired guns tensed, hands drifting to their weapons. "Easy, Miss Hart," Masters warned quietly. "Don't give them an excuse." Kane stirred, lifting his head with visible effort. "She stays with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but still carrying that dangerous edge. "You want to question us? You question us together. Otherwise, I might forget what happened out there." Blackwood's jaw tightened. Here was the problem with hired killers. They didn't always follow the script. "Sheriff, surely you're not going to allow these criminals to dictate terms." "I'm going to allow a wounded man medical care and ensure both suspects are treated fairly until formal charges are filed," Masters replied. "Doc Brennan's office is secure enough. I'll post guards." The crowd parted as they made their way to the doctor's office, whispers following in their wake. Evelyn caught fragments. "Killed them all. Blood on her hands. Heroes or murderers." She kept her eyes forward, supporting Kane as they dismounted. Doc Brennan was a competent man who'd patched up plenty of gunshot wounds over the years. He took one look at Kane and immediately went to work, not asking questions about how the injury had occurred. While he worked, Evelyn stood by the window watching the street. Blackwood's men had taken up positions around the building, making escape impossible even if Kane had been in any condition to run. "The bullet nicked an artery," Doc Brennan said after his examination. "I can repair it, but he's lost a lot of blood. He'll be weak for days, maybe weeks." "Do what you need to do," Masters said, then turned to Evelyn. "We need to talk about what happened out there." "Not without a lawyer," Kane managed to say before the doctor gave him laudanum for the pain. "The only lawyers in town work for the railroad," Masters said grimly, "but there might be another option. Father Miguel knows some law, studied it before he took the cloth. It's not ideal, but—" "Get him," Evelyn said immediately. She trusted the priest more than anyone else in Silver Ridge besides Masters himself. While they waited, she sat beside Kane's bed, holding the evidence they'd gathered. The maps, the ledgers, Blackwood's signed letter. It felt pitifully small against the weight of money and influence arrayed against them. Outside, she could hear Blackwood's voice, giving what sounded like a speech to the gathered townspeople about law and order and the danger of vigilantes. Father Miguel arrived within the hour, his weathered face grave. "I've heard what's being said," he told them quietly. "Blackwood claims you murdered legitimate security personnel who were investigating rustling in the area." "They were the Black Raven gang," Evelyn said flatly. "Morrison, Crow, all of them. We have proof." She showed him the evidence, watching his expression darken as he read. "This is damning, but Blackwood will have explanations. He'll claim he hired them not knowing their true nature, that they deceived him." "They murdered families," Evelyn's voice rose. "My family, the Hartleys?" "I know, child," Father Miguel said gently. "But the law requires proof of intent, and Blackwood is clever enough to maintain plausible deniability." Kane stirred on the bed, the laudanum not quite enough to keep him completely under. "The survivors," he mumbled. "The ones we tied up." They're in custody, Masters said, but they're terrified. Someone got to them. They're claiming they don't know anything about any murders, that they were just ranch hands hired for security work. Evelyn felt the walls closing in. Blackwood had thought of everything, covered every angle. So we're going to hang for doing what the law couldn't? Not if I can help it, Masters said firmly, but we need more. Something Blackwood can't explain away. That's when Tom Brennan stumbled through the door, reeking of whiskey but with his eyes clearer than Evelyn had seen them in years. I know something, he slurred, then seemed to catch himself, standing straighter. About Blackwood. About what he's really after. Everyone turned to stare at the town drunk. Tom pulled out a flask, took a long drink, then said, I wasn't always a drunk. 10 years ago, I was a surveyor for the Geological Survey. I mapped this whole region, including the Hart property. Evelyn's breath caught. You knew my father. Good man, your father. Which is why I told him what I'd found. Tom's hands shook as he continued. There's a vein of silver under your land, Miss Hart. One of the richest I've ever seen, runs right under where your house stood, extends for miles. Silver? Father Miguel breathed. How much? Millions of dollars worth, maybe more. Your father wanted to file a proper claim, do things legal, but someone else found out about my survey. Tom's voice turned bitter. Blackwood. He tried to buy the information from me, and when I refused, he destroyed my reputation, said I'd falsified surveys. No one would hire me after that. That's when I started drinking. But why not just buy the land legally? Masters asked. Because once a mineral claim is filed, it becomes public record, Tom explained. Other mining companies would compete, drive the price up. But if the land could be acquired quietly, before any claims were filed, Blackwood could control it all, make it look like he discovered the silver himself. So he hired the Black Ravens to drive families off their land, Evelyn said, the final pieces clicking into place. Make it look like random violence, pick up the abandoned properties for nothing. Can you testify to this? Father Miguel asked Tom urgently. Tom laughed bitterly. The word of a known drunk against Richard Blackwood? Who'd believe me? I would, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Samuel, the piano player, standing there with several other townspeople. Tom's telling the truth. I've seen Blackwood's men surveying at night, taking samples. They're not interested in running rails through here. They want what's under the ground. More people crowded into the doctor's office, drawn by word spreading through the town. The bartender from the Imperial Hotel spoke up. I served Blackwood and that judge last night. Heard them talking about needing to silence the Hart woman quickly before she could testify. That's hearsay, Father Miguel warned, though he looked pleased at the support. Maybe, said Mrs. Patterson, who ran the general store. But I sold supplies to Morrison's gang many times, and Blackwood's foreman always paid the bills. Seemed strange at the time, railroad security needing so much ammunition. The crowd grew, and with it the testimonies. Little things people had seen but not understood, connections they hadn't made until now. Blackwood had been playing a long game, but in a small town, nothing stayed completely hidden. This changes things, Masters said, hope creeping into his voice. With enough witnesses, the door burst open and one of Blackwood's hired guns entered, hand on his weapon. Judge's orders. The prisoners are to be moved to the jail immediately for formal arraignment. Kane can't be moved, Doc Brennan protested. I'm still working on him. Judge's orders, the man repeated, and now more hired guns appeared behind him. Masters stood, his hand moving to his own gun. These people are in my custody. Not anymore. Judge Harrington himself appeared, holding an official-looking document. By the authority vested in me by the territorial government, I'm assuming jurisdiction over this case. These murderers will be tried tomorrow morning, and justice will be swift. Tomorrow? Father Miguel protested. That's not enough time to prepare a defense. They were caught with blood on their hands and stolen property from the victims, Harrington said smoothly. The case is clear-cut. Sheriff, stand aside or be removed from office. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Masters looked ready to fight, and several townspeople were openly hostile to the hired guns. Evelyn could see it all going bad fast. A shootout here would give Blackwood exactly what he wanted, an excuse to declare martial law and take complete control. "It's all right, Bill," she said quietly, standing up. "We'll go." Kane managed to open his eyes. "Evelyn, no. You need to finish getting patched up," she told him firmly. "Doc, how much longer?" "Another hour at least," Brennan said. She looked at Harrington. "1 hour. Then we'll go peacefully. Unless you want to explain to the territorial governor why a wounded man died in your custody before trial." Harrington clearly wanted to refuse, but the crowd was growing restless, and even his hired guns looked uncomfortable with the idea of dragging a half-dead man from a doctor's table. 1 hour, he conceded. "But the woman comes now." "No," Masters said firmly. "They stay together, or this whole town is going to have a problem with it." Behind him, the crowd murmured agreement, some men prominently adjusting their gun belts. Harrington retreated, but not before giving Evelyn a look that promised retribution. The hired guns withdrew to just outside, maintaining their perimeter. In the brief respite, Father Miguel leaned close to Evelyn. "There might be another way. Territorial law allows for a change of venue if the defendant can prove they can't get a fair trial locally. We could demand the trial be moved to the capital, where Blackwood probably owns even more judges," Evelyn said bitterly. "Perhaps. But it would buy time, and time is what we need. Kane needs to heal. We need to gather more evidence. Get these witness testimonies properly documented." Tom Brennan spoke up again. "There's something else. I kept copies of my original surveys, hidden them. If I could get them, they'd prove what's under the heartland." "Where?" Masters asked urgently. "In an old mine shaft about 5 miles north. I figured no one would look there." Masters nodded to 2 of his deputies. "Go. Fast. Bring back whatever you find." As the hour neared its end, Kane was finally stable, though still weak. Doc Brennan had done what he could, but Kane would need days of rest to properly recover. Instead, he was about to be thrown in a jail cell. "Listen to me," Kane said to Evelyn as they prepared to move him. "Blackwood's type always has a weakness. Usually it's arrogance. He thinks he's won, which means he'll make a mistake. And if he doesn't?" Kane managed a weak smile. "Then we make our own opportunity." "I've been in worse spots." Evelyn doubted that, but didn't argue. As they helped Kane to his feet, supported between her and Masters, she saw the crowd outside had grown even larger. Word had spread through Silver Ridge like wildfire. The showdown between their sheriff and the railroad money was coming to a head. The walk to the jail was surreal. Blackwood stood on the hotel porch, watching with satisfaction as his hired guns escorted them. But the townspeople lined the route, and their faces weren't friendly toward the railroad man. Some called out support to Evelyn and Kane, others just stared at Blackwood with open hostility. The jail was small, just 2 cells. They put Kane in one, Evelyn in the other. As the doors clanged shut, she felt a moment of panic. She'd traded one cage for another, first the saloon, now this. "Don't look so pleased with yourself, Blackwood," Masters said as the railroad man came to gloat. "This isn't over." "Oh, but it is, Sheriff," Blackwood replied smoothly. "Tomorrow these 2 will hang for murder, and then we can all get back to business. The railroad will bring prosperity to Silver Ridge. Those who cooperate will benefit greatly." "And those who don't?" Masters asked. Blackwood's smile was cold. Why would anyone not want progress? After he left, Masters stayed behind. "I'll have men watching all night," he told them quietly. "My men, not his. If anything happens—" "Nothing's going to happen," Evelyn said with more confidence than she felt. "He wants this legal. Wants to make an example of us." Night fell, and with it came visitors. Father Miguel returned with paper and pen, helping them write out their full testimony. Tom Brennan came, more sober than he'd been in years, to provide a detailed statement about the silver deposits. Even Samuel stopped by, bringing food and quiet encouragement. It was near midnight when the unexpected visitor arrived. Evelyn was dozing on the hard cell bunk when she heard voices. She looked up to see a woman in traveling clothes speaking urgently with Masters. She was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair and intelligent eyes. "I demand to see the prisoners," she was saying. "I have that right." "Ma'am, I don't even know who you are," Masters protested. "My name is Catherine Morrison," she said, and Evelyn's blood went cold. Caleb Morrison was my husband. Master's hand went to his gun. If you're here for revenge, I'm here for justice, Catherine interrupted, but not the kind you think. She looked directly at Evelyn through the bars. My husband was a monster, Miss Hart. I know what he did to your family. I know what he did to many families, and I have proof. Evelyn stood, gripping the bars. What kind of proof? Catherine pulled out a leather journal. Caleb kept records. Names, dates, payments. He was paranoid that Blackwood would eventually betray him, so he documented everything, including correspondence that proves Blackwood specifically ordered the murders, not just the evictions. Why would you help us? Kane asked from his cell, voice still weak but alert. Because Caleb killed my brother, Catherine said simply. He was a homesteader who refused to sell to the railroad. I married Caleb before I knew what he was, and by then it was too late to leave safely. When I heard he was dead, I felt nothing but relief. Masters took the journal, flipping through it quickly. His eyes widened. This is it. This is what we needed. Direct orders from Blackwood, payments for specific murders. It won't matter if the judge doesn't allow it as evidence, Father Miguel warned. Then we make sure everyone knows about it before the trial, Catherine said. I've already sent copies to newspapers in the capital. They should arrive by tomorrow afternoon. You clever woman, Kane said with admiration. I learned from living with devils, Catherine replied. Mr. Blackwood won't be the only one controlling the narrative. The sound of gunfire erupted outside. Masters ran to the window, cursing. Blackwood's men are shooting at something, or someone. More gunfire, and then one of Masters' deputies burst in. Sheriff, Tom Brennan and the others made it back with the surveys, but Blackwood's men tried to stop them. It's turning into a battle out there. Masters looked torn between staying to guard the prisoners and going to help his men. Evelyn made the decision for him. Go. We're locked up tight. Your men need you. As Masters ran out, Catherine moved closer to Evelyn's cell. There's something else you should know. The silver vein. It's even richer than Tom said. Caleb had it properly surveyed in secret. We're talking about one of the largest deposits ever found in the territory. Worth killing for, Kane observed. Worth dying for, in Blackwood's mind, Catherine agreed. He's invested everything in this scheme. If it fails, he's ruined. The gunfire outside was getting closer. Through the barred window, Evelyn could see muzzle flashes, figures running through the streets. The whole town was erupting. They're fighting back, she breathed. The townspeople are actually fighting back. The jail door burst open, but instead of Masters or his deputies, it was 3 of Blackwood's hired guns. Their intent was clear in their eyes. Judge's orders, one said with a cruel smile. The prisoners tried to escape. We had no choice but to shoot them. There are witnesses here, Father Miguel protested, stepping forward. Not for long, the gunman replied, raising his weapon. Catherine moved faster than Evelyn would have expected. She pulled a derringer from her purse and shot the lead gunman in the chest. As he fell, Kane managed to grab the man's gun through the bars, despite his wounded shoulder. His shot took the second gunman, while Father Miguel, surprising everyone, produced an old Colt from under his robes and fired at the third. A priest with a gun? Evelyn said in shock. I wasn't always a priest, Father Miguel replied grimly, checking that the threats were down. Catherine took the keys from the dead gunman's belt and unlocked their cells. We need to go. Now, Blackwood will claim we murdered his men. We can't run, Evelyn protested. That makes us look guilty. You look guilty either way in Blackwood's court, Catherine pointed out, but alive and guilty beats dead and innocent. Kane was already moving, though he had to lean heavily on the cell door. She's right. We need to get to the capital, tell our story to authorities Blackwood doesn't own. Can you ride? Evelyn asked him. I'll ride or die trying, he replied. They emerged from the jail into chaos. The main street of Silver Ridge had become a battlefield. On one side, Blackwood's hired guns had taken cover behind water troughs and wagons. On the other, the townspeople, miners, shopkeepers, even some of the saloon girls, were fighting back with whatever weapons they had. Masters was in the middle of it, directing the defense. When he saw them, he didn't look surprised. Go, he shouted over the gunfire. Get to the capital. We'll hold them here. Bill, Evelyn started. This is our town, he said firmly. We should have stood up to bullies like Blackwood long ago. Now get! They made their way to the livery stable, dodging bullets and ducking through alleys. The horses were panicked by the gunfire, but Evelyn managed to calm Duchess while Catherine helped Kane onto his mount. I'm coming with you, Catherine said, saddling another horse. It'll be dangerous, Kane warned. My life's been dangerous since I married Caleb, she replied. At least now the danger has purpose. As they prepared to ride out, Tom Brennan appeared, clutching a leather satchel. The surveys, he gasped, handing them to Evelyn. The real ones. Don't let Blackwood win. Come with us, she urged. No, my place is here. Been running from myself in a bottle for too long. Time to stand for something. He pulled out an old rifle. Besides, someone needs to tell your story if you don't make it. They rode hard into the darkness, the sound of battle fading behind them. Evelyn looked back once to see flames rising from parts of Silver Ridge. Whether from Blackwood's men or the defenders, she couldn't tell. We're outlaws now, Catherine said, riding beside her. We were always outlaws, Kane replied from her other side, his voice tight with pain but determined. The moment we stood against men like Blackwood, the law was never going to be on our side. Then we make our own law? Evelyn said, thinking of her father's words about standing for what's right, even when it costs everything. They rode through the night, three unlikely allies bound by loss and a thirst for justice. Behind them, Silver Ridge burned. Ahead, the capital waited with its own dangers and possibilities. But for the first time in 3 years, Evelyn felt truly alive. She wasn't running from her past anymore. She was riding toward something, even if she wasn't sure what. The moon rose full and bright, illuminating the desert landscape in silver light. How appropriate, Evelyn thought, that silver should light their way. The very thing Blackwood killed for might be the thing that destroyed him, if they could stay alive long enough to use it. There, Kane pointed to dust clouds on the horizon. Riders, coming fast. Blackwood's men? Catherine asked. Most likely. He can't let us reach the capital with this evidence. Evelyn checked her rifle, the familiar weight comforting in her hands. Then we don't let them stop us. They spurred their horses faster, racing against time and the killers behind them. The chase was on, and this time Evelyn swore she wouldn't be the one left picking up the pieces. This time she'd be the storm that others feared. The riders behind them were gaining. Evelyn could make out at least 6 figures in the moonlight, and they were pushing their horses hard. These weren't ordinary hired guns. They rode like men who'd spent their lives in the saddle, probably remnants of the Black Raven gang who'd been out on raids when the Devil's Canyon attack happened. We can't outrun them, Kane said, his voice strained. The hard riding was taking its toll on his wounded shoulder. Then we don't run, Evelyn replied, spotting a cluster of rocks ahead that would provide good cover. We make our stand there. They reached the rocks just as the first shots rang out, bullets whining off the stone. The 3 of them dismounted quickly, Kane nearly falling before Catherine caught him. They took positions among the boulders, checking their ammunition. 6 of them, 3 of us, and 1 wounded, Catherine assessed grimly. Not the best odds. I've had worse, Kane said, though his face was pale in the moonlight. The attackers spread out, trying to flank them. Evelyn could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their assault. These men knew their business. Miss Hart, one called out, Mr. Blackwood wants to make you an offer. Come back peaceful-like, and he'll make sure you get a fair trial. Even pay for a real lawyer from back east. Like the fair trial he planned with a bullet in the jail, Evelyn shouted back. That was a misunderstanding. Some of the boys got overzealous. Mr. Blackwood was quite upset about it. I'll bet he was, Kane muttered. Upset they failed. The spokesman continued. You can't win this. Even if you somehow get past us, Blackwood has connections everywhere. You'll never make it to anyone who'll listen. Maybe not, Evelyn replied, sighting down her rifle. But we're going to try. She fired, her shot catching one of the flanking riders in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. The night erupted in gunfire, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireflies. Catherine proved to be a surprisingly good shot, dropping another attacker with careful, measured fire. Caleb insisted I learn, she explained between shots. Said a gang leader's woman needed to be able to defend herself. Ironic that I'm using his lessons against his associates. Kane, despite his wound, was deadly accurate with his pistol, forcing the attackers to keep their distance. But they were running low on ammunition, and the outlaws knew it. They're going to rush us soon, Kane warned. When they do, he was cut off by the sound of more horses approaching. Evelyn's heart sank. Reinforcements for Blackwood. But then she heard a familiar voice shouting, "For Silver Ridge!" Sheriff Masters and a dozen townsmen came charging out of the darkness, guns blazing. The outlaws, caught between two forces, broke and scattered. Some tried to flee, only to be ridden down. Others threw down their weapons and surrendered. In minutes, it was over. Masters rode up to their position, grinning despite a bloody gash on his forehead. "Didn't think we'd let you have all the fun, did you?" "The town?" Evelyn asked urgently. "Secure." Blackwood's hired guns either dead or locked up. Blackwood himself barricaded in the hotel with that corrupt judge, but they're not going anywhere. Masters' expression turned serious. "But this isn't over. He'll have more men coming, and the territorial government won't ignore what happened. We've got maybe 2 days before the army shows up." "Then we need to move fast," Catherine said, showing Masters the journal. "This needs to get to the newspapers, the real authorities, everyone who'll listen." Masters nodded. "I've sent riders to every town in 100 miles, spreading the word. But you three need to disappear for a while. Blackwood has a long reach and a longer memory." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "I'm done running. Done hiding. My family's land has silver under it. Then I'm filing a proper claim. Legal and binding." "That'll make you a target," Kane warned. "I've been a target for 3 years. At least now I know why." She looked at Masters. "Can you hold the town until we get back?" "Get back from where?" "The capital. We're going to file the claim, present the evidence to the territorial governor himself, and make sure everyone knows what Blackwood did." "That's near 300 miles, Masters pointed out. "Then we'd better get started," Evelyn replied. They redistributed supplies and ammunition from the defeated outlaws, then prepared to continue their journey. Masters assigned 4 of his best men to accompany them as far as the territorial border. As they were about to leave, Tom Brennan rode up, more sober and clear-eyed than anyone had seen him in a decade. "I'm coming with you," he announced. "You'll need someone who understands the legal aspects of mineral claims. Plus, my testimony about the original surveys will carry weight." "Can you stay sober that long?" Kane asked bluntly. Tom's jaw tightened. "I've been drunk for 10 years because I let Blackwood destroy me without fighting back. This is my chance for redemption. I won't waste it." The expanded group set off, riding hard through the remainder of the night. As dawn broke, they stopped to rest the horses and tend to Kane's wound. The damage from the fight had reopened some of Doc Brennan's work, and fresh blood stained his shirt. "You need proper medical attention," Catherine said, cleaning the wound as best she could. "I need to see this through," Kane replied stubbornly. "Dead heroes are just dead," Evelyn told him. "We need you alive." "Then keep me that way," he said, meeting her eyes. Something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. They pushed on through the day, the landscape changing from desert to scrubland to the first hints of mountain country. At every water stop they expected to see pursuit, but the horizon remained clear. "Maybe Masters stopped them all," Catherine suggested hopefully. "Or Blackwood's planning something bigger," Kane countered. "Men like him don't give up easy." That night they made camp in a box canyon with only one entrance, posting guards in rotation. Around the campfire, Tom Brennan spread out his surveys, showing them the full extent of the silver deposits. "Your father was sitting on a fortune," he told Evelyn. "But he wanted to do things right, make sure the wealth benefited the whole region, not just himself." "That sounds like him," Evelyn said softly. "He always said prosperity should lift everyone, not just the few." "Noble sentiment," Catherine observed. "But nobility got him killed." "No," Evelyn corrected. "Greed got him killed. Blackwood's greed." "What will you do?" Kane asked. "If we succeed, if the claim is recognized, you'll be wealthy beyond imagining." Evelyn stared into the fire, thinking, "I'll rebuild. Not just my family's ranch, but help rebuild Silver Ridge. Make it what it could have been if men like Blackwood hadn't bled it dry. And you? She asked Kane. What will you do when this is over? Find another job, another hunt, he said automatically, then paused. Or maybe it's time I stopped hunting. Been chasing ghosts so long, I've forgotten what it's like to chase something else. Like what? Catherine asked. Like a future, he said quietly, his eyes on Evelyn. The next morning brought trouble. One of Master's men, who'd been scouting ahead, came racing back. Soldiers, he reported, a full cavalry unit, maybe 30 men, coming this way? Blackwood's reach, Bar? Kane wondered. Or legitimate army responding to reports of an uprising in Silver Ridge, Tom suggested. Either way, meeting them would likely end with their arrest. They had to avoid the cavalry, which meant leaving the main trail and cutting through much rougher terrain. The detour cost them time and exhausted both horses and riders. Kane was barely staying in the saddle, his face gray with pain and blood loss. They had to stop frequently, and each stop made Evelyn more anxious. On the third night, disaster nearly struck. They'd made camp in a grove of cottonwoods near a stream when Catherine, on watch, spotted lights approaching. Not torches or lanterns, but the steadier glow of military lamp. The cavalry found us, she whispered urgently, waking the others. They grabbed what they could and scattered into the darkness, leading their horses on foot through the stream to hide their tracks. Behind them, they could hear soldiers entering their abandoned camp, shouting orders to search the area. For hours they crept through the darkness, Kane leaning heavily on Evelyn, barely conscious. Finally, as dawn approached, they found shelter in an abandoned mine shaft Tom remembered from his surveying days. We can't keep this up, Catherine said, looking at Kane's deteriorating condition. He needs help. There's a town about 10 miles from here, Tom said. Prosperity. It's got a doctor and a telegraph office. And probably wanted posters with our faces on them, Evelyn pointed out. Maybe. But Kane will die if we don't get him help. Evelyn made a decision. Tom, Catherine, take the evidence and ride for the capital. Get to the newspapers, the governor, anyone who will listen. What about you? Catherine asked. I'm taking Kane to that doctor. Then we'll catch up. That's suicide, Tom protested. You'll be recognized. Maybe. But I won't let him die for my vengeance. She looked at Kane, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. He's lost enough. We all have. They argued, but eventually agreed to her plan. Catherine took Morrison's journal and most of the other evidence, while Tom kept his surveys. They'd approach the capital from different directions, maximizing the chance that at least one of them would get through. As the others rode off, Evelyn fashioned a travois for Kane, who could no longer sit a horse. She covered him with blankets and set off for Prosperity, praying she wasn't leading them both to their deaths. The town was larger than Silver Ridge, with actual brick buildings and paved streets in the center. Evelyn pulled her hat low and affected a limp, hoping anyone watching would focus on that rather than her face. The doctor's office was on a side street, a small building with living quarters above. She knocked urgently, and an elderly man answered, taking in Kane's condition with a professional eye. Gunshot? He asked. Hunting accident, Evelyn lied. Please, he's dying. The doctor, who introduced himself as Dr. Holcomb, helped her get Kane inside. As he worked, he said conversationally, Funny thing about hunting accidents, they usually involve shotguns, not what looks like a .44 caliber bullet wound. Evelyn's hand drifted to her gun. Are you going to help him or not? Oh, I'll help him. I'm a doctor, not a judge. He continued working, his hands steady and skilled. Though I should mention there were soldiers through here yesterday looking for a man and woman matching your descriptions. Something about murders down in Silver Ridge. We didn't murder anyone, Evelyn said quietly. We killed outlaws who'd been terrorizing the territory for years. The Black Raven gang? Dr. Holcomb looked up sharply. You're the ones who took them down. Yes. The doctor was quiet for a moment, then said, My nephew lived near Devil's Canyon. The gang killed him and his wife 2 years ago, made it look like Indians did it. If you truly stop them, then you have my gratitude and my silence. He worked through the morning, cleaning and properly treating Kane's wound, stitching damaged tissue. administering medicines Evelyn didn't recognize. Finally, he stepped back. He'll live if infection doesn't set in. But he needs rest, at least a week before he can travel. We don't have a week, Evelyn said desperately. Then you don't have him, the doctor said bluntly. Move him now, and he dies. Simple as that. Evelyn slumped in a chair, exhausted and defeated. They'd come so far, fought so hard, and now they were trapped by Kane's own body. There might be another way, Dr. Holcomb said thoughtfully. My brother runs a freight company. Has a wagon going to the capital tomorrow with medical supplies. If your friend is stable by then, you could travel hidden in the wagon. Why would you help us? Because the Black Ravens killed my nephew, the doctor said simply. And because I've heard of Richard Blackwood. Men like him are a cancer on this territory. If you're standing against him, then I'll help however I can. That night, while Kane slept under the influence of laudanum, Evelyn sat by his bedside and planned. Catherine and Tom should reach the capital within 2 days. If she and Kane could get there even a few days after, they might still be able to support their testimony. Kane woke briefly near midnight, his eyes focusing on her face. You should have left me, he said weakly. Probably, she agreed, but I've gotten used to having you around. You're a hard habit to break, Jonas Kane. He managed a smile. Likewise, Evelyn Hart. Rest now, she told him. Tomorrow we hide in a wagon like common criminals. We are criminals according to Blackwood's law. Then we'll be the best damn criminals the territory has ever seen. The next morning, Dr. Holcomb's brother arrived with his freight wagon. He was a taciturn man who asked no questions, simply helped load Kane into a hidden compartment among the medical supplies. Evelyn squeezed in beside him, her rifle close at hand. 2 days to the capital, the driver said. Try not to die back there. Blood's hard to explain to inspectors. As the wagon rolled out of prosperity, Evelyn allowed herself a moment of hope. They were battered, wounded, and wanted, but they were still moving forward. The evidence was on its way to people who could use it, and she had kept Kane alive, just as he had helped keep her soul from completely darkening. Through a crack in the wagon's side, she could see the mountains in the distance, and beyond them, somewhere, lay the capital with its promises of justice or judgment. Either way, she thought, gripping Kane's hand as he slept, they would face it together. The wagon hit a rut, jostling them, and Kane groaned in his sleep. Evelyn steadied him, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep about safety and rest, and a future beyond violence. But for now, in this dark, cramped space that smelled of medicines and hope, she let herself believe they might actually make it. 2 days. 2 days to the capital, to the confrontation that would determine everything. 2 days to figure out how to bring down a man with all the money and power, with only truth and determination as weapons. The wagon rolled steadily through the night, each bump and rut sending fresh pain through Kane's wounded shoulder, despite the laudanum Dr. Holcomb had provided. Evelyn held him steady, her arms aching from the constant tension of keeping them both stable in the cramped compartment. Through the thin walls, she could hear the driver occasionally talking to his horses, the normal sound strangely comforting after days of gunfire and pursuit. On the morning of the second day, they stopped at a way station to water the horses. Evelyn heard voices outside, official sounding, and her hand went to her rifle. Military inspection, from the sounds of it. She held her breath as Boots approached the wagon. "What's your cargo?" a young soldier's voice asked. "Medical supplies for St. Mary's Hospital in the capital," the driver replied calmly. "Got the paperwork right here?" There was rustling of papers, then the soldier said, "Mind if we check?" "We're looking for fugitives from Silver Ridge. Man and woman, both armed and dangerous." "Check all you want," the driver said, "though I'd be careful with them medicine bottles. Some of that stuff's worth more than you make in a year." Evelyn heard the wagon's rear gate open, felt the vehicle shift as someone climbed in. Light filtered through cracks as boxes were moved. The soldier was being thorough, working his way methodically through the cargo. He was only feet away from their hidden compartment. Kane stirred in his sleep, a soft groan escaping his lips. Evelyn pressed her hand over his mouth, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the soldier would hear it. The searching sound stopped. "What was that?" the soldier asked. "What was what?" The driver responded. Only thing in there besides medicine is maybe some rats. They get in sometimes looking for the grain we use for packing. There was a long pause, then the soldier climbed out. Seems clear. But if you see anyone suspicious on the road, you report it, understood? Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir, the driver agreed. The inspection party moved on, and after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the wagon started rolling again. Evelyn finally allowed herself to breathe, her hands still trembling from the close call. Kane's eyes were open, fully conscious for the first time since they'd left Prosperity. Quick thinking, he whispered. You nearly gave us away, she whispered back, though there was relief in her voice at seeing him lucid. Sorry. The dreams? He trailed off, his expression darkening. I was back at Cedar Falls trying to save them. Evelyn understood. Her own dreams were full of smoke and screams of arriving too late or being unable to move while horror unfolded. They're gone, she said gently. But we're here. We're alive. And we're going to make sure no one else suffers what we did. The rest of the journey passed without incident, though Evelyn remained tense, listening for any sign of pursuit or discovery. As they neared the capital, the traffic on the road increased. Through her small viewing crack, she could see other wagons, riders, even a few automobiles, rare sights that spoke of the capital's relative prosperity. The city itself was unlike anything in the frontier territories. Buildings of brick and stone rose 3 and 4 stories high. Streets were paved with cobblestones, and gas lamps lined the main thoroughfares. The wagon wound through increasingly crowded streets until finally stopping behind a large building. St. Mary's Hospital, the driver announced, opening their compartment. There's a back entrance here. Doc Holcomb sent word ahead. They're expecting you. A nun in a pristine white habit was waiting, her face kind but businesslike. Quickly, she said, helping them extract Kane from the wagon. We have a room prepared. They were whisked through corridors that smelled of carbolic and soap, finally reaching a small private room. As nurses tended to Kane, the nun, who introduced herself as Sister Margaret, turned to Evelyn. Dr. Holcomb's telegram said you needed sanctuary as well as medical care. You're safe here. The church grounds are considered neutral territory. Even the territorial authorities need special permission to enter. Thank you, Evelyn said, though she kept her rifle close. She'd learned that safety was often an illusion. There's someone waiting to see you, Sister Margaret continued. She said you'd know her, Catherine? Relief flooded through Evelyn. She made it? Arrived yesterday with an older gentleman. They've been quite busy from what I understand. She's in the chapel. Evelyn found Catherine kneeling in a pew, though she doubted the woman was praying. Her suspicion was confirmed when Catherine looked up, her expression all business. Thank God you made it, Catherine said, embracing her briefly. Tom's at the newspaper office. The editor was skeptical at first, but once he saw Morrison's journal and the surveys, he became very interested. The morning edition tomorrow will have everything. And the authorities? That's more complicated. The territorial governor is cautious. He's agreed to meet with us, but not until he sees how the public reacts to the newspaper story. Politics, she said with disgust. What about Blackwood? Catherine's expression darkened. He arrived yesterday with a small army of lawyers and that corrupt judge. They're claiming the Silver Ridge incident was an armed insurrection against legitimate authority. There's talk of bringing in federal troops. Let them come, Evelyn said grimly. We have the truth. The truth doesn't always win, especially when the other side has money and influence. Catherine paused, then added, There's something else. Tom discovered something while researching at the land office. Your father did file a mineral claim secretly, just days before he died. It was witnessed by Father Miguel and Sheriff Masters. Evelyn's breath caught. Then legally, you own the mineral rights to that land. Blackwood can't touch it without your permission. That's why he needed your family dead, to break the chain of ownership. The implications hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Her father had known, had tried to protect their future, and had died for it. Where's the claim document? Tom has it. He's making copies, distributing them to various lawyers and officials, making sure it can't disappear. Over the next 2 days, they prepared for battle, though this fight would be waged with words and laws rather than guns. Kane slowly improved, able to sit up and contribute to their strategy sessions. Tom had sobered up completely, his mind sharp as he navigated the complex legal waters they found themselves in. The newspaper story broke like thunder across the capital. The headline screamed, "Massacre for Money. Railroad magnate accused of ordering family murders for silver rights." The evidence was laid out in damning detail. Morrison's journal entries, Blackwood's signed payment authorizations, testimony from Catherine about her husband's activities. The public reaction was immediate and fierce. Crowds gathered outside Blackwood's hotel, demanding justice. The governor could no longer remain neutral, announcing a formal inquiry to begin immediately. The hearing was held in the territorial court building, a grand structure meant to impress and intimidate. Evelyn wore a borrowed dress, feeling strange without her rifle, though she'd insisted on keeping her father's Colt hidden in her purse. Kane was beside her, still pale but steady, while Tom and Catherine sat behind them. Blackwood entered with his entourage of lawyers, looking confident despite the public outcry. He was dressed impeccably, every inch the successful businessman, and his expression suggested this was all a minor inconvenience. The territorial governor himself presided, a gray-haired man named Wallace, who'd held the position for a decade. He called the hearing to order with obvious reluctance. "This is not a criminal trial," he began carefully. "This is an inquiry into the events at Silver Ridge and the allegations made against Mr. Richard Blackwood. We will hear evidence and testimony that then I will decide what, if any, formal charges should be filed." Blackwood's lead lawyer, a snake named Pemberton, immediately stood. "Governor Wallace, we object to this entire proceeding. My client is a respected businessman who has brought prosperity to this territory. These accusations come from admitted killers who murdered over a dozen men, including legitimate security personnel. Personnel who were identified as the Black Raven Gang," Tom Brennan interrupted, standing. "I have testimony from survivors confirming their identity." "The testimony of criminals trying to save their own necks," Pemberton countered smoothly. The governor raised his hand for silence. "We will hear all evidence in proper order. Miss Hart, as the primary accuser, you may present your case." Evelyn stood, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the room. 3 years ago, my family was murdered. My father, mother, and brother burned alive in their home. I survived only because I was hidden in our root cellar, where I listened to them die." She had to pause, steadying herself. Kane's hand briefly touched hers, a small gesture of support. "I thought it was random violence," she continued. "Outlaws doing what outlaws do. But it wasn't random. They were killed because my father had discovered silver on our land and filed a legal claim. They were killed because Richard Blackwood wanted that silver." She presented the evidence methodically: Morrison's journal, the payment records, the surveys showing the silver deposits. Tom testified about his original geological survey and how Blackwood had destroyed his career when he wouldn't sell the information. Catherine spoke about her husband's activities, the murders he'd bragged about committing for Blackwood. Throughout it all, Blackwood sat calmly, occasionally whispering to his lawyers, showing no emotion as his crimes were laid bare. When it was the defense's turn, Pemberton stood with theatrical confidence. "This is all very tragic, but where is the proof that Mr. Blackwood ordered these deaths? We have payment records, yes. My client hired security to protect railroad interests. That some of these men may have had criminal pasts was unknown to him. We have the journal of a dead outlaw, which could easily be fabricated. We have testimony from a drunk surveyor and the widow of a criminal, both with reasons to lie." "Are you calling me a liar?" Tom stood angrily. "I'm saying you're a drunk who lost his position due to incompetence and now seeks revenge on the man you blame for your failures. That's not—" "And Mrs. Morrison," Pemberton continued, turning to Catherine, "you claim your husband was a monster, yet you stayed with him for years. Either you were complicit in his crimes, making your testimony worthless, or you're lying now to avoid prosecution yourself." Catherine's face flushed, but before she could respond, Pemberton produced his own evidence. Documents suggesting Tom had been fired for falsifying surveys, witnesses who claimed to have seen Evelyn and Kane murder innocent men in cold blood. "The truth is," Pemberton concluded, "these people are the real criminals here. They took the law into their own hands, murdered men they claimed were outlaws without trial or evidence, and now seek to justify their crimes by smearing an honest businessman. The hearing was going badly. Evelyn could see it in the governor's expression, the way he avoided eye contact with them. Blackwood's money and influence were turning their truth into questionable testimony. That's when the doors burst open and Sheriff Masters walked in, dusty from hard travel and accompanied by 6 men from Silver Ridge, including Samuel the piano player and, surprisingly, 3 of Blackwood's former hired guns in shackles. "Governor Wallace," Masters announced, "I have additional evidence and witnesses." "This is highly irregular," Pemberton protested. "So is massacring families for silver," Masters shot back. He approached the bench. These 3 men were part of Blackwood's force in Silver Ridge. They've agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. The first hired gun, a scarred man named Dell, took the witness chair nervously. "Mr. Blackwood hired us through Judge Harrington," he said without preamble. "Told us to clean out the town, make it look like the townspeople started it. Said once they were gone, he'd own everything worth having." "He's lying to save himself," Pemberton argued. "Then how about this?" Masters produced a telegram. This was sent from Blackwood to Judge Harrington 2 days before the Silver Ridge fight. It says, and I quote, "Eliminate all witnesses. Heartwoman priority. Make it look like escape attempt." The courtroom erupted. Blackwood's calm finally cracked as he stood, shouting, "That's a forgery!" "The telegraph office confirmed it came from your hotel," Masters continued calmly, "paid for by your assistant, charged to your account." But Pemberton wasn't done. Even if genuine, this telegram could mean anything. Eliminate could mean legally, through proper arrest. My client is being railroaded by a conspiracy of frontier vigilantes. Governor Wallace called for order, but Evelyn could see he was overwhelmed. This was beyond his political comfort zone, a case that could define or destroy his career. That's when Kane stood, speaking for the first time. "Governor, there's one more piece of evidence. Something that proves Blackwood's guilt beyond any doubt." Everyone turned to him as he continued. "I've been hunting the Black Raven gang for 2 years, following their trail of death across 3 territories. In each case, they targeted specific families who owned land along proposed railroad routes. But here's what I discovered. There was never going to be a railroad through Silver Ridge." "What?" Even Blackwood looked surprised. "I checked with the Railroad Commission. The proposed route was rejected 6 months ago due to terrain issues, but Blackwood kept the fiction alive because he'd discovered something more valuable than railway right-of-way: mineral deposits. Not just in Silver Ridge, but across the entire region." Kane produced a map, marked with X's. Each X is a family the Black Ravens hit. Each one sits on valuable mineral deposits: silver, copper, even gold. Blackwood wasn't building a railroad empire. He was building a mining empire, using murder to get the land cheap. "Speculation," Pemberton said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Not speculation," Tom Brennan said, standing again. "I surveyed all these locations years ago. The geological reports were filed, but then mysteriously disappeared. Except," he smiled grimly, "I kept copies. Personal copies hidden away. They show rich deposits at every single location where families were murdered." The courtroom was silent as Tom spread out survey after survey, each one corresponding to a murdered family, each one showing valuable minerals. The pattern was undeniable. Blackwood stood slowly, his face cold. "You think you've won? I own judges, senators, even generals. You're nothing but frontier trash playing at justice. I'll be free within a week, and when I am, I'll destroy every one of you." "No," a new voice said from the back of the room. "You won't." Everyone turned to see a distinguished man in an expensive suit entering the courtroom. Evelyn didn't recognize him, but Blackwood went pale. "Mr. Vanderbilt," the governor stood respectfully. The man nodded to the governor, then addressed the room. "Cornelius Vanderbilt, Jr., representing the Eastern Investment Consortium. We've been watching Mr. Blackwood's activities with growing concern. Bad for business, you understand, when one of our associates engages in mass murder." "Cornelius, I can explain," Blackwood started. "No need," Vanderbilt cut him off. "We've conducted our own investigation. The consortium is withdrawing all financial support from your enterprises, effective immediately. Furthermore, We'll be cooperating fully with any criminal prosecution. Blackwood looked like he'd been punched. Without the consortium's backing, his empire would crumble within days. Governor Wallace, sensing which way the wind was blowing, stood decisively. Based on the evidence presented, I'm ordering the immediate arrest of Richard Blackwood on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and corruption. Judge Harrington is likewise to be arrested pending investigation. The courtroom erupted as marshals moved to arrest Blackwood. He tried to run but didn't get far. Kane's fist dropped him with a single blow. That's for Cedar Falls, Kane said quietly, standing over the unconscious railroad magnate. As Blackwood was dragged away, Pemberton quickly distanced himself, claiming he'd been deceived by his client. The other lawyers scattered like rats from a sinking ship. Governor Wallace approached Evelyn. Miss Hart, the territory owes you an apology and a debt. Your father's mineral claim will be recognized immediately. The wealth under your land is yours by right. And the murder charges against us? Kane asked. What murder charges? Wallace said with a political smile. I see only heroes who stopped a dangerous gang of outlaws. The territory might even owe you a reward. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, word of Blackwood's arrest spreading quickly. As Evelyn emerged, someone started clapping, then another. Soon the entire crowd was applauding, some calling her a hero, others simply expressing relief that justice had been done. But Evelyn felt no triumph, only exhaustion. It's over, she said to Kane. The legal part, maybe, he replied. But Blackwood was right about one thing. He has friends, influence. This isn't finished. As if to prove his point, a shot rang out. Evelyn felt something tug at her dress. Then Kane was pushing her down, covering her with his body as more shots followed. Screams erupted from the crowd as people scattered. Sniper, Kane identified, pointing to a building across the street. Probably Blackwood's insurance policy. Masters and his men were already moving, converging on the building. Tom and Catherine had taken cover behind a fountain, Tom shielding Catherine despite having no weapon. We need to move, Kane said, but as they started to rise, more shots drove them back down. That's when Evelyn saw him, Vanderbilt, calmly walking through the gunfire as if on a Sunday stroll. He raised a hand and suddenly the shooting stopped. Men in dark suits emerged from various positions, surrounding the sniper's building. Within moments, they dragged out a struggling gunman. Mr. Blackwood's remaining assets have been secured, Vanderbilt announced to no one in particular. There will be no more interference. He approached Evelyn and Kane. Miss Hart, Mr. Kane, the consortium would like to make you a business proposition. Your land's silver is valuable, but extracting it properly requires capital, expertise. We could be partners. I'd rather deal with the devil I know, Evelyn said flatly. Vanderbilt smiled. Wise. But the offer stands, should you reconsider. He tipped his hat and walked away, his men falling in behind him like shadows. As the chaos settled, Evelyn realized they were truly free. Blackwood was finished, his hired killers dead or arrested, his empire crumbling. She owned her land and its wealth free and clear. She'd gotten her vengeance and her justice. So why did she feel so empty? That evening, they gathered in the hotel bar. Evelyn, Kane, Tom, Catherine, and Masters. The sheriff had to return to Silver Ridge in the morning to oversee the town's recovery. Tom was already making plans to restart his surveying business, his reputation restored by the day's revelations. Catherine spoke of traveling east, starting fresh where the Morrison name meant nothing. And you? Masters asked Evelyn. What will you do with your fortune? She stared into her whiskey, thinking. First, I bury my family properly. Then, I don't know. The silver was my father's dream, not mine. You could rebuild the ranch, Tom suggested. Make it what your family wanted. Maybe. She looked at Kane. What about you? Off to another hunt? Kane was quiet for a moment. I've been hunting for so long, I'm not sure I know how to do anything else. But maybe it's time to learn. You could stay, Evelyn said quietly. Help me figure out what to do with a silver mine I never wanted. Is that a job offer? It's whatever you want it to be. Their eyes met and held, something unspoken passing between them. They'd been brought together by violence and vengeance, but perhaps something else could grow from that dark soil. Masters raised his glass. To the dead, who deserve remembering. To the living, who deserve peace, and to justice, however long it takes to arrive. They drank, and for a moment the weight of the past 3 years seemed lighter, but Evelyn knew it would never fully leave her. The ghosts of her family, of Cain's family, of all the families destroyed by greed, they would always be there. Later, alone on the hotel's balcony, Evelyn watched the stars appear over the Capitol. Cain joined her, moving carefully but steadily. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Any of it?" "I regret that it was necessary," she replied. "I regret that my family died for silver they never even got to see. I regret a lot of things. But stopping Blackwood? Stopping the Black Ravens? Number. That needed doing. And now? Now I try to remember how to be something other than an instrument of vengeance. It's been so long, I'm not sure I remember how." "We could learn together," Cain suggested. "Two broken people trying to be whole." "That sounds like a terrible idea," Evelyn said with a small smile. "Lucky for you, I specialize in terrible ideas." He laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him. Then we're perfectly matched. As the night deepened around them, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't involve gunfire and blood. It was a fragile vision, uncertain and untested, but it was something. After 3 years of living for revenge, she finally had a reason to live for something else. Tomorrow, she would return to Silver Ridge. She would bury her dead, claim her inheritance, and begin the long work of building something from the ashes. It wouldn't bring her family back, wouldn't erase the pain, but perhaps it could honor their memory in a way that vengeance never could. The ghosts would always be with her, she knew, but maybe, with time and with help from the damaged man beside her, she could learn to live with them rather than for them. The thought terrified her almost as much as facing down outlaws had, because hope was so much more dangerous than hatred. But as Cain's hand found hers in the darkness, she decided it was a risk worth taking. In the street below, life went on, people laughing, arguing, living their lives unaware of the drama that had unfolded in their midst. Soon, Evelyn Hart would be just another story, another tale of frontier justice to be embellished with each telling. But for now, in this moment, she was just a woman on a balcony with a man who understood her darkness, looking at stars that didn't care about human grief or human justice, finding in their ancient light a kind of peace she'd thought lost forever. The silver could wait, the future could wait. For tonight, it was enough to be alive, to be free, and to not be alone with the ghosts. Though she didn't know it yet, back in Silver Ridge, Father Miguel was already organizing the town's recovery, using Blackwood's seized assets to rebuild what had been destroyed. The town would survive, even thrive, and at its center would stand a monument to the Hart family and all the others who'd died for the greed of powerful men. But that was tomorrow's story. Tonight was for rest, for remembering, and for the first fragile steps towards something that might, someday, feel like redemption. The journey back to Silver Ridge took 5 days, their small convoy moving at a deliberate pace through the changing landscape. Evelyn rode Duchess, the faithful mare who'd carried her through the worst of the fighting, while Cain sat his own mount more steadily with each passing day, his strength returning, though the shoulder still pained him. Tom Brennan drove a wagon loaded with supplies for the town's rebuilding, having used some of his restored reputation to secure credit from capital merchants. Catherine had chosen to accompany them, saying she needed to see the place where her husband had died, to make peace with that chapter of her life before moving on. As they crested the final rise before Silver Ridge, they all stopped, taking in the scene below. The town showed its scars, burned buildings, bullet-pocked walls, makeshift graves on the hillside. But it was alive. People moved through the streets, hammers rang with the sound of construction, and smoke rose from chimneys rather than ruins. It survived, Tom said with wonder. After everything, it survived. Towns are like people, Cain observed. The tough ones find a way to keep going, no matter what gets thrown at them. They rode down Main Street to find it transformed. The Imperial Hotel where Blackwood had held court was now a medical clinic, with Doc Brennan supervising the conversion. The saloon where Evelyn had spent 3 years serving whiskey to broken men was being rebuilt, but with a new sign: the Second Chance Saloon. Sheriff Masters met them in front of his office, his badge polished but his clothes dusty from helping with construction. "Welcome home," he said simply, though his eyes held volumes of unspoken relief. How many did we lose? Evelyn asked, dreading the answer. 7 townspeople in the fighting, Masters replied soberly, but it could have been so much worse. When word spread about what really happened, about Blackwood's schemes, people came from all over to help. Silver Ridge has become something of a symbol. A symbol of what? Catherine asked. That ordinary people can stand up to powerful men and win, Masters said, though the cost is always higher than anyone expects. Father Miguel emerged from his church, older looking than when they'd left, but with a light in his eyes that had been absent for years. Evelyn, he said warmly, embracing her, your father would be proud. You've honored his memory in ways he never could have imagined. I need to bury them properly, she said, the words catching in her throat. They've been in temporary graves for 3 years. I've made arrangements, Father Miguel assured her. Tomorrow, if you're ready. The whole town wants to attend. That evening, Evelyn stood at the site of her family's ranch. The burned timbers had been cleared away, leaving only the stone foundation and the chimney standing like a monument to what had been. The root cellar where she'd hidden that terrible night was still there, its wooden door weathered but intact. Cain found her there as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. You don't have to do this alone, he said quietly. This is where it happened, she said, her voice distant. Right here, my father tried to reason with them. Over there, Tommy made his stand. And there, she pointed to a spot near what had been the barn, my mother died trying to protect the horses. She loved those horses. Cain stood beside her, solid and quiet, letting her speak or not as she needed. I keep thinking I should feel different, she continued. Blackwood's finished, the gang is dead, justice was served. But I still feel empty, like I've been hollowed out and nothing's left to fill the space. Vengeance does that, Cain said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. You focus on it so long, make it your reason for breathing, that when it's done, you don't know how to breathe for any other reason. How do you move past it? You don't, not really. You just learn to build around it. Like this town, they're not forgetting what happened. They're building something new while keeping the memory. He paused, then added, It helps to have a reason to build, and someone to build with. She turned to look at him, seeing her own damage reflected in his storm-gray eyes, but also something else, a tentative hope that hadn't been there before. Is that an offer, Jonas Cain? It's whatever you want it to be, Evelyn Hart. Before she could respond, they heard horses approaching. Tom Brennan rode up with several men from town, all carrying tools and lumber. Figured you might want to start rebuilding, Tom said. The boys and I thought we'd get the framework up, at least. If that's all right with you. Evelyn looked at the assembled men, miners, shopkeepers, even some of Blackwood's former hired guns who'd chosen to stay and make amends. They stood awkwardly, tools in hand, waiting for her word. Thank you, she managed, her voice thick. All of you. They worked until full dark, setting posts and beams by lantern light, the skeleton of a new house rising from the ashes of the old. It wouldn't be the same, nothing ever could be, but it would be hers, built with the help of a community that had bled for justice alongside her. The next morning dawned clear and bright for the funeral. The entire town turned out, along with people from neighboring settlements who'd heard the story. 3 coffins, her father, mother, and brother, were carried to the hillside cemetery where a section had been cleared among the wildflowers. Father Miguel spoke of redemption and justice, of the cost of standing against evil and the courage it took to rebuild after loss. But it was Tom Brennan who surprised everyone by stepping forward to speak. I knew William Hart, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. He was a good man who wanted to do right by his family and his community. When he found that silver, his first thought wasn't of wealth for himself, but how it could help everyone. He died for that principle, but his daughter saw it through. The Hart family's sacrifice saved this town, maybe this whole territory, from becoming Blackwood's private kingdom. We owe them more than we can ever repay. Others spoke. Masters about her father's integrity. Samuel about her mother's kindness. Even Catherine about the courage it took to seek justice rather than just revenge. Through it all, Evelyn stood silent, Cain beside her, feeling the weight of 3 years lifting slowly from her shoulders. As they lowered the coffins, she finally found words. "They weren't perfect people," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "My father could be stubborn, my mother worried too much, and Tommy was terrible at his chores. But they were good people who didn't deserve what happened to them. None of the families did. I spent 3 years living for vengeance, and while I'm glad Blackwood and his killers faced justice, it didn't bring them back. Nothing will." She paused, looking at the assembled faces, weathered, worn, but alive with possibility. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is what we do with what's left. My father found silver in this ground, but the real treasure was always the people. You stood up when it mattered. You fought when you had every reason to run. You're rebuilding when it would be easier to abandon this place. That's the legacy I want to honor, not the silver, but the spirit. As the last earth was placed on the graves, Evelyn made a decision. "Tom," she called out, "you still have those surveys?" "Of course," he replied, confused. "Good, because we're going to need them. The silver mine is going to open, but not for me. For Silver Ridge, every family that lost someone, every person who stood and fought, gets a share. This wealth belongs to the community, not to any one person." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Masters stepped forward. "Evelyn, that's millions of dollars you're talking about giving away." "Not giving away," she corrected. "Investing. In the town, in the people, in making sure that what Blackwood tried to do can never happen again." "The legal complications alone," Tom started. "Which is why you're going to help me set it up properly," she told him. "A trust, or a company, whatever it takes. You know the law, you know mining, make it work." Catherine stepped forward. "I have experience with business arrangements from my late husband's enterprises. I could help structure it, if you'd have me." "I thought you were heading east," Evelyn said. "I was, but maybe I need to see something built before I can move on from what was destroyed." Over the following weeks, the plan took shape. The Silver Ridge Mining Collective was formed, with shares distributed among the townspeople based on their losses and contributions to the fight against Blackwood. Tom managed the technical aspects, Catherine the business side, and Masters ensured everything stayed legal. The first survey teams went out within a month, confirming what Tom's original work had shown. The vein was even richer than expected. Kane recovered fully, though he still favored his left shoulder on cold mornings. He'd taken to helping Masters with peacekeeping duties, his reputation ensuring that troublemakers thought twice before causing problems in Silver Ridge. But Evelyn could see the restlessness in him, the way his eyes would scan the horizon as if expecting trouble or seeking escape. "You don't have to stay," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch of her partially rebuilt house. "I know this isn't what you're used to." "I've been running for so long, I'm not sure I know how to stay still," he admitted. "Every morning I wake up expecting to saddle up and chase someone or be chased." "Is that what you want?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I used to think motion was living, that if I kept moving, kept hunting, I wouldn't have to think about what I'd lost. But lately," he looked at her. "Lately, I've been thinking that maybe standing still with the right person is its own kind of adventure." "That's either the most romantic or the most reluctant declaration I've ever heard," Evelyn said with a small smile. "I'm out of practice with words that aren't threats or demands," he admitted. "But I'm trying to say that if you'll have me, I'd like to stay. Help build something instead of tearing things down for once. Even if it means dealing with mining disputes and town council meetings instead of gunfights. Even then, though I reserve the right to complain about the tedium." "Deal," she said. And when he kissed her, it tasted like promise and possibility, tinged with the bitter experience that would always be part of them. The mine opened 3 months later, with Father Miguel blessing the entrance while the whole town watched. The first silver ore that came up was richer than anyone had dared hope, and within 6 months, Silver Ridge had transformed from a dying frontier town to a booming mining center. But unlike other boom towns, the wealth was shared. New businesses opened, houses were built properly, a school was established, and Doc Brennan got his expanded clinic. Not everything was smooth. There were disputes over shares, attempts by outside interests to muscle in, and the eternal challenges of managing sudden wealth. A group of claim jumpers tried to establish a competing mine, leading to a tense standoff that Kane resolved with his particular combination of reputation and readiness for violence. "You didn't have to shoot him," Evelyn said afterward, bandaging a graze on his arm from the encounter. "I didn't shoot him. I shot near him." "There's a difference," Kane replied. "Besides, sometimes the threat of violence prevents actual violence. That's a dangerous philosophy. It's a realistic one. There will always be men like Blackwood, people who want to take what others have built. The question is whether we're ready for them." He was right, of course. 6 months after the mine opened, they received word that Blackwood had been found dead in his prison cell, apparently murdered by another inmate. But the rumors said it was no random prison killing. Someone had paid for his death. Someone who didn't want him talking about his connections and conspiracies. "Vanderbilt," Catherine said when she heard. "Or someone like him. Blackwood knew too much about too many powerful people." "Does it matter?" Tom asked. "He's gone. Justice was served." Was it? Evelyn wondered. Or was it just another form of frontier justice, dressed up in different clothes? There was no answer to that, just as there was no neat ending to their story. Life went on, complicated and messy and real. The town grew, faced new challenges, overcame some and struggled with others. Evelyn and Kane built their life together, two damaged people learning to trust in something beyond survival. A year after the mine opened, they married in Father Miguel's church, with Masters as Kane's best man and Catherine as Evelyn's maid of honor. Tom, now completely sober and respected as the territory's leading geological surveyor, gave a toast that brought tears to hard eyes. "To second chances," he said, raising his glass. "To the courage to take them, and the wisdom to recognize them when they come. And to Evelyn and Jonas, who reminded us all that justice isn't about the law. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." As they danced at their reception, the whole town celebrating around them, Kane whispered, "No regrets?" "None about this," Evelyn replied. "You?" "I regret it took so much death to bring us together. But no regrets about choosing to stay, to build rather than destroy. Even with all the town council meetings? They're almost as dangerous as gunfights, just slower." She laughed, and he spun her, and for a moment the ghosts were quiet, content perhaps to see something good come from so much sorrow. 5 years passed. The mine continued to produce, making Silver Ridge one of the wealthiest towns in the territory. But Evelyn made sure the wealth was used wisely, investing in infrastructure, education, and helping other communities defend themselves against would-be Blackwoods. She and Kane had 2 children, a boy named William after her father, and a girl named Sarah after Kane's lost wife. Watching Kane with the children, teaching them to ride, telling them stories, carefully edited, of their adventures, Evelyn saw him finally make peace with his ghosts. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked one evening as they watched their children play in the yard of the house built where her childhood home had stood. "The hunting? The danger?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "There's a simplicity to that life. Track, hunt, capture or kill, move on. This," he gestured at their home, their children, the thriving town beyond. "This is harder, more complicated, but also more rewarding. Even the town council meetings? I've been elected sheriff now so I can arrest anyone who makes them too boring. That's not how it works. It should be." Their peace was tested, of course. Other mining companies tried to move in, sometimes with legal maneuvers, sometimes with hired guns. Each time, the town stood together, their shared prosperity making them strong. Kane's reputation helped. Few gunmen wanted to face the man who'd brought down the Black Raven gang. But it was the community's unity that truly kept them safe. Catherine had stayed, surprising everyone, including herself. She'd become the town's unofficial legal advisor and business manager. Her sharp mind and hard-earned experience invaluable in navigating the complex world of territorial commerce. She never remarried, saying once was enough for any lifetime, but she seemed content with her independence and her role in the town's success. Tom Brennan became something of a legend, the drunk surveyor who'd hidden crucial evidence and helped bring down a corrupt empire. He used his redemption to help other struggling souls, establishing a kind of informal temperance society that met in the Second Chance Saloon, of all places. It's fitting, he explained. We're better to learn to resist temptation than surrounded by it. Sheriff Masters retired after 2 years, his body no longer able to keep up with the demands of peacekeeping in a boom town. Kane took over, bringing a different kind of law enforcement, less concerned with strict legal interpretation, more focused on keeping the peace and protecting the community. You're supposed to uphold the law, a territorial administrator once told him. I uphold justice, Kane replied. Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not. I know which one the people of Silver Ridge prefer. The administrator didn't argue, perhaps remembering what had happened to the last officials who'd tried to impose their will on Silver Ridge. One day, 10 years after that night in Devil's Canyon, a young woman arrived in town, asking for Evelyn. She was perhaps 20, with haunted eyes that Evelyn recognized all too well. My family was killed by outlaws, the woman said. Everyone says there's no point seeking justice, that the law won't help, but I heard about you, about what you did. Will you help me? Evelyn looked at the young woman, seeing herself a decade ago, angry, desperate, alone. She glanced at Kane, who gave a small nod. We don't do that anymore, Evelyn said gently. But we can teach you how to seek justice properly, legally. And if the law fails, she paused, remembering her own journey. If the law fails, we'll make sure you're not alone in whatever comes next. They helped the woman, working through legal channels that their prosperity and influence had opened. The outlaws were caught, tried, and hanged, all properly legal. The woman's land was recovered, and she was given support to rebuild. You've become what you once fought against, Catherine observed one day. A power broker, someone who can manipulate the system. The difference is we remember what it's like to be powerless, Evelyn replied, and we use our power to help those who are where we once were. Power corrupts, they say. Only if you let it. Only if you forget why you sought it in the first place. As their children grew, Evelyn and Kane told them stories of their grandparents, their heritage, the price of freedom and justice. Young William showed his grandfather's stubborn integrity, while Sarah had her namesake's fierce independence. They would inherit a fortune, but more importantly, they would inherit the responsibility that came with it. Do you think they'll understand? Kane asked one night as they watched their children sleep. What we did, why we did it. Maybe not, Evelyn admitted. They're growing up in a world we helped make safer. They might not understand the world that existed before, the one that killed our families. Is that a bad thing? No, it means we succeeded. They get to be innocent in ways we never could be after a certain point. The territory achieved statehood eventually, bringing more law, more structure, more civilization. Silver Ridge adapted, its collective ownership model becoming a template for other communities. Evelyn testified before the new state legislature about their experience, helping craft laws that would prevent another Blackwood from rising. You're quite the stateswoman now, Kane teased after one such session. I prefer reform vigilante with political connections, she replied. Doesn't have the same ring to it, but it's more honest. 20 years after that night when Jonas Kane walked into her saloon, Evelyn stood again at her parents' graves. Her children played among the headstones, respectful but unafraid of death. It was history to them, not the raw wound it remained for her. I think you'd be proud, she said quietly to the stones. Not of everything I did, maybe, but of what came from it. The town is thriving, people are prospering, and the kind of evil that took you, well, it still exists, but now we're ready for it. Kane stood beside her, his hair more gray than black now, the lines on his face deeper, but the storm in his eyes calm to occasional clouds. They would be proud, he said. You took their deaths and made them mean something. We did, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. You would have found a way. You're the strongest person I know. Strength born from loss isn't strength anyone should want. No, but it's the strength the world sometimes needs. As they walked back toward town, their children running ahead, Evelyn reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the ashes of her family's death had come vengeance, then justice, then something more, a legacy of protection for others who might face similar darkness. The silver mine still produced, though less than in the early years. But it had done its job, transforming Silver Ridge from a dying town to a thriving city. The Second Chance Saloon still stood. though now it was as much museum as drinking establishment, with photographs on the walls telling the story of the town's resurrection. In one photo, barely visible in the background, stood a young woman with haunted eyes, serving drinks to broken men. In another, that same woman stood with a rifle, ready to fight for justice. In the last, she stood with her family, her community, the ghosts finally quiet, if never quite gone. "Mom," young Sarah called, "tell us again about the night you met Dad." "It was a dark time," Evelyn began, as she always did, editing the violence into something her children could understand. "The town was in trouble, bad men were doing bad things, and everyone was afraid." "But not you," William said proudly. "Oh, I was afraid," Evelyn corrected, "but sometimes being afraid and doing what's right anyway is what courage really is." "And Dad came to help?" Sarah prompted. "He came for his own reasons," Evelyn said, glancing at Kane with a small smile. "But yes, he helped. And together, with the help of many brave people, we made things right." "And everyone lived happily ever after?" William asked, though at 12 he was beginning to suspect that real stories didn't end that way. "Everyone lived," Evelyn said carefully, "and we all did our best to be happy. That's all anyone can do." As the sun set over Silver Ridge, painting the sky in the same reds and golds as that night so long ago, Evelyn Hart Kane stood with her family, her community, her hard-won peace. The ghosts would always be there, her father's integrity, her mother's love, Tommy's courage, and all the others who died along the way. But they were quiet now, satisfied perhaps that their sacrifice had meaning, that from death had come life. From vengeance had come justice, and from justice had come something worth preserving. The story of Silver Ridge would be told for generations, growing in the telling until fact and legend intertwined inseparably. But for those who lived it, who bled for it, the truth was both simpler and more complex. It was a story of ordinary people who refused to accept injustice, who paid the price for resistance, and who learned that sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying your enemies but building something they could never have imagined. In the end, Evelyn thought as she tucked her children into bed that night, that was the true victory. Not the silver, not the wealth, not even the justice served on Blackwood and his gang, but this, the simple, profound act of living well after loss, of choosing hope over hatred, of building rather than burning. The ghosts of Silver Ridge would always remain, woven into the very foundations of the town, but they were not angry spirits seeking vengeance anymore. They were reminders of the price of freedom, the cost of justice, and the enduring truth that sometimes, against all odds and expectations, the good guys do win. Even if they have to become something else to do it. Even if the victory comes at a price that can never be fully paid. Even if happily ever after is just another way of saying the fighting's done for now.